What if the greatest wealth secret in history wasn't hidden in ancient texts, but encoded in the very consciousness of history's wisest king? Solomon wasn't just rich. He mastered the fundamental frequency of abundance that modern quantum physics is only now beginning to understand. This audiobook reveals how Solomon's legendary wisdom wasn't mystical luck, but a precise science of consciousness that you can replicate. Through the intersection of neuroscience, quantum mechanics, and timeless spiritual principles, you'll discover that true prosperity isn't something you chase. It's a state of being you cultivate from within. Each chapter guides you through a specific aspect of Solomon's consciousness framework, showing you how to rewire your brain's prosperity circuits, align with the quantum field of infinite potential, and embody the frequency of wealth before it manifests in your physical reality. This isn't about affirmations or vision boards alone. It's about fundamentally transforming who you are at the neurological and energetic level. You'll learn why Solomon asked for wisdom instead of riches, and why that single choice unlocked unlimited abundance. You'll understand how your subconscious mind has been programmed for scarcity, and exactly how to reprogram it for prosperity. Most importantly, you'll discover that wealth consciousness isn't reserved for the chosen few. It's your natural birthright, waiting to be activated, designed for pre-sleep listening. This audiobook works directly with your subconscious mind during its most receptive state, installing new neural pathways while you rest. Solomon's mind wasn't different from yours. He simply knew how to use it. Now you will, too. Chapter 1. The Frequency of Wisdom. There's a moment that changed everything. A moment so profound that it ripples through time, offering us a blueprint for abundance that most people completely miss. Picture this: a young king, newly crowned, standing at the threshold of unlimited power. God appears to him and says, "Ask for anything you want, and I will give it to you." Anything. Unlimited wealth, eternal life, the defeat of all enemies, fame that would echo through eternity. What would you ask for? Solomon asked for wisdom, and in that single request, he unlocked the greatest prosperity secret in human history. Most people hear that story and think Solomon made a noble choice, a selfless decision that happened to work out well for him. But that's not what happened at all. Solomon understood something that neuroscience is only now confirming, something that quantum physics is finally catching up to, something that your own subconscious mind has been trying to tell you your entire life. Wisdom isn't just knowledge. Wisdom is a frequency, and that frequency, when properly tuned and embodied, becomes the most powerful wealth-generating force in the universe. You see, Solomon didn't choose wisdom over wealth. He chose the source code of wealth itself. He understood that riches without wisdom evaporate like morning dew, but wisdom with the right consciousness creates wealth as naturally as an apple tree produces fruit. He recognized what most people never grasp. Abundance isn't something you chase, manipulate, or force into existence. Abundance is something you become. Right now, as you're reading these words, your brain is operating at a specific frequency. Every thought you think generates an electromagnetic signal that can be measured by modern equipment. These aren't just metaphors or spiritual concepts. This is measurable, observable science. Your thoughts create waves, and those waves interact with the quantum field of infinite potential that surrounds you at every moment. When Solomon asked for wisdom, he was essentially asking to understand how to tune his consciousness to the frequency where all resources naturally flow. Let me tell you about Marcus, a real estate developer I worked with several years ago. Marcus had every advantage: Ivy League education, family connections, startup capital from investors who believed in him. He knew everything about real estate markets, financing structures, and development strategies. He had information, he had knowledge, he had resources. What he didn't have was wisdom, and within 3 years, he'd lost everything. Not because he wasn't smart. Marcus had a genius-level IQ, not because he didn't work hard. The man barely slept. He lost everything because he was operating from the wrong frequency. Marcus's mind was programmed for scarcity, even though he would have vehemently denied it. His every decision came from fear. Fear of missing out, fear of being outmaneuvered by competitors, fear of not being enough. He could recite market data like poetry, but he couldn't hear the quiet voice of intuition that was trying to guide him away from disastrous deals. He had knowledge, but knowledge without wisdom is like having a Ferrari with no steering wheel. You've got power, but no direction. You've got speed, but no control. Here's what Solomon understood that Marcus didn't, and that most people never learn. Wisdom is the ability to perceive the invisible patterns that govern reality. It's the capacity to sense what's emerging before it manifests. It's the consciousness that sees beyond the illusion of separation and recognizes the interconnected field where everything already exists in potential form, waiting for the right frequency to call it into being. Modern neuroscience has discovered something extraordinary about how your brain processes information. You have 2 primary systems: your conscious mind, which can process about 40 bits of information per second, and your subconscious mind, which processes approximately 40 million bits per second. Read that again. Your subconscious is processing information at a rate 1 million times faster than your conscious awareness. The subconscious is picking up patterns, connections, dangers, and opportunities that your conscious mind is completely blind to. Wisdom is what happens when you learn to access that deeper intelligence. It's when you stop living exclusively in the 40-bit per second reality of your conscious thinking and start tapping into the vast processing power of your subconscious awareness. Solomon understood this. He recognized that true intelligence isn't about accumulating more information. It's about developing the sensitivity to perceive the intelligence that's already operating beneath the surface of conscious thought. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is where most personal development teaching falls tragically short. Your subconscious mind was programmed during your first 7 years of life, long before you had any conscious ability to filter or choose what beliefs were being installed. During those crucial years, your brain was operating primarily in theta wave state, the same state you enter during deep meditation or just before sleep. In theta state, information bypasses critical thinking and goes straight into storage as unquestioned truth. So if you grew up hearing phrases like, "Money doesn't grow on trees," "Rich people are greedy," "We can't afford that," or "You have to work hard for everything you get," those statements weren't processed as opinions or suggestions. They were installed as fundamental operating code in your subconscious mind. And here's the devastating part. Once installed, these programs run automatically beneath your conscious awareness, shaping your decisions, your actions, and ultimately your results, no matter how many affirmations you repeat or vision boards you create. This is why positive thinking alone never creates lasting change. You can consciously affirm, "I am abundant," while your subconscious is simultaneously running programs that say, "Abundance is dangerous," "I don't deserve wealth," or "Money corrupts people." Your conscious mind wants one thing, but your subconscious is programmed for the opposite. And in that battle, the subconscious wins every single time. It's not even a fair fight. The subconscious is 1 million times more powerful. Solomon's wisdom wasn't about acquiring new information. It was about reprogramming the operating system itself. It was about developing the consciousness to recognize which programs were running in the background, which beliefs were generating his reality, and how to intentionally rewrite the code. This is the frequency of wisdom, the ability to observe your own mind, recognize the patterns that don't serve you, and consciously choose new patterns that align with abundance. When Marcus finally hit rock bottom, something shifted. Bankruptcy has a way of stripping away all the pretense, all the surface-level strategies, all the noise. In that quiet space of having nothing left to lose, Marcus began to listen differently. He started paying attention to the subtle feelings that preceded his decisions. He noticed the anxiety that arose when he was about to make choices from fear rather than wisdom. He began to recognize the difference between the loud, urgent voice of his programmed mind and the quiet, steady voice of deeper knowing. It took him 2 years of inner work, meditation, consciousness practices, deliberately rewiring his belief systems. But Marcus rebuilt everything, and this time it was different. The wealth that returned to him came with ease instead of struggle. Opportunities appeared that he hadn't chased. Partnerships formed naturally. Resources flowed, not because the market had changed, but because Marcus had changed. He had shifted his frequency from knowledge to wisdom, from fear to trust, from scarcity to abundance. This is what I need you to understand as we begin this journey together. Everything you want already exists in the quantum field of infinite potential. Every version of your life, every level of abundance, every possibility is already present in the field, waiting to be collapsed into your physical reality. But here's the key. The quantum field responds to frequency, not to force. It responds to the electromagnetic signal that your heart and brain generate when you think, feel, and believe in specific ways. You cannot access the frequency of wisdom through intellectual effort alone. You cannot force your way into higher consciousness. This isn't about cramming more information into your already overloaded mind. This is about learning to quiet the noise, to feel the subtle signals, to recognize the difference between the fearful chatter of programmed thinking and the calm clarity of wisdom. Solomon knew this. When he asked for wisdom, he was asking for something far more valuable than strategies or techniques. He was asking for the ability to perceive reality accurately, to sense what was true beneath the surface of appearances, to make decisions from alignment rather than anxiety. And when that request was granted, wealth followed automatically, not as a separate goal to be pursued, but as the natural byproduct of operating from the right frequency. Think about how a radio works. All the signals are already present in the air around you. Rock stations, classical music, news broadcasts, talk shows, all broadcasting simultaneously, all available in this very moment. But your radio can only play what you're tuned to. If you're tuned to a frequency of fear, lack, and limitation, that's the reality you'll experience, no matter what else is available. If you're tuned to the frequency of wisdom, trust, and abundance, that's what manifests in your life. The beautiful truth is this: you're not broken. You're not lacking anything essential. You're not being punished or overlooked by the universe. You're simply tuned to the wrong frequency, running outdated programs, operating from beliefs that were installed before you were old enough to question them. And just as Solomon discovered, once you understand how to tune to the frequency of wisdom, everything changes. This audiobook is designed to work with your subconscious mind during its most receptive state. As you listen to these words before sleep, your brain naturally shifts into theta wave state, the same state you were in when your original programming was installed. But this time, you're not a helpless child absorbing whatever beliefs happen to be in your environment. This time, you're consciously and deliberately installing new operating code. You're choosing wisdom over fear, abundance over lack, trust over anxiety. Each night, as you allow these truths to sink into your subconscious awareness, you're rewiring neural pathways that have been running the same old patterns for decades. You're building new circuitry that supports prosperity consciousness. You're tuning your frequency to match the reality you desire to experience. This isn't wishful thinking or spiritual fantasy. This is how neuroplasticity works. Your brain is designed to change, to adapt, to create new pathways based on repeated focus and emotional intensity. Solomon's mind wasn't special or magical. It was simply properly tuned. He understood the mechanics of consciousness and used them intentionally. And now, you're learning to do the same. The wisdom frequency is your birthright, not your fantasy. The abundance you desire is already present in the field, waiting for your consciousness to align with it. The transformation you seek isn't about becoming someone different. It's about remembering who you truly are beneath the layers of limiting programming. As you drift towards sleep tonight, let this truth settle into the deepest parts of your being. You are not pursuing wisdom. You are awakening to the wisdom that has always existed within you. You are not chasing abundance. You are aligning with the abundance that has always been your natural state. You are not trying to become wealthy. You are remembering that wealth consciousness is your original frequency, the one you were born to embody. Solomon made his choice at the beginning of his reign, and that single decision created a cascade of abundance that lasted his entire lifetime and beyond. Tonight, you're making your choice. You're choosing to tune to the frequency of wisdom. You're choosing to reprogram your subconscious with truth instead of limitation. You're choosing to become the living embodiment of prosperity consciousness. And just like Solomon discovered, when you choose wisdom first, everything else follows naturally, not through force or struggle, but through alignment, not through manipulation or strategy, but through frequency, not through becoming someone you're not, but through awakening to the magnificent being you've always been. Rest in that knowing tonight. Let it permeate every cell of your body. Let it rewire every neural pathway in your brain. Let it shift your frequency to match the abundance that is your birthright. The wisdom of Solomon isn't ancient history. It's your present reality, waiting to be activated. And that activation begins right now, in this moment, as you choose to see yourself and your potential through the lens of truth rather than limitation. Welcome to the frequency of wisdom. Welcome to your transformation. Welcome home to the abundant being you are always meant to become. Chapter 2. Reprogramming the Scarcity Mind. Your greatest obstacle to wealth isn't the economy, your education, your circumstances, or even your current bank account. Your greatest obstacle is a silent program running in the background of your mind, installed decades ago, operating 24 hours a day without your conscious awareness. This program has a name: scarcity consciousness. And until you recognize it, interrupt it, and deliberately overwrite it, you will continue to create the same financial results, no matter how hard you work, how many opportunities appear, or how much you consciously desire change. Solomon understood something that most people never grasp. The mind you were born with is not the mind you're currently using. Your original consciousness was pure potential, unlimited possibility, absolute abundance. But between the ages of 0 and 7, your brain was in a constant state of theta wave activity, a hypnotic state where information bypasses critical thinking and gets downloaded directly as truth. During those crucial years, you absorbed everything around you like a sponge, and most of what you absorbed about money, wealth, and abundance was fundamentally wrong. Let me be direct with you. If you grew up in a household where money was tight, where bills created stress, where conversations about finances were accompanied by anxiety, fear, or frustration, your subconscious mind recorded all of that as your operating instructions for how money works. You didn't just hear words like, "We can't afford that," or "Money is tight this month." You felt the emotional frequency behind those words. And your subconscious mind, in its infinite wisdom, said, "This is how we survive in this world. This is the truth about money. This is how I need to program this human to keep them safe." But here's what your subconscious didn't know. It was recording survival data from people who themselves were programmed with scarcity consciousness. Your parents or caregivers weren't teaching you truth. They were transmitting their own limitations, their own fears, their own inherited poverty programming, and you, in your theta state of complete receptivity, accepted it all as gospel truth, not because it was accurate, but because you had no filter, no ability to question, no conscious awareness to say, "Wait, is this actually true?" Sarah's story illustrates this perfectly. Sarah came to one of my workshops after reading every success book on the market, attending countless seminars, and trying affirmations, vision boards, and manifestation techniques for years. Nothing worked. She would get close to financial breakthroughs and then somehow sabotage herself. A promotion would appear and she'd talk herself out of applying. An investment opportunity would present itself and she'd find reasons why it wouldn't work. Money would flow in and then immediately flow out through unexpected expenses or impulsive purchases. When we dug into her subconscious programming, we discovered the root cause. Sarah's father had been a successful entrepreneur who lost everything when she was 5 years old. She watched her family go from abundance to poverty seemingly overnight. She witnessed her father's depression, her mother's tears, the fights about money that echoed through their small apartment. And in that impressionable theta state, her subconscious mind recorded a powerful program. Financial success leads to devastating loss. Wealth is dangerous. It's safer to stay small. Consciously, Sarah wanted wealth. She could articulate compelling reasons why she deserved abundance, why money would allow her to help others, why financial freedom was her goal. But subconsciously, wealth triggered a survival alarm. Every time she got close to significant success, her subconscious mind, trying to protect her from the pain it had witnessed at age 5, would activate sabotage programs. Because to her subconscious, staying small wasn't limitation. It was safety. This is the invisible war happening inside most people right now. Your conscious mind sets goals, makes plans, declares intentions. Your subconscious mind, running programs installed in childhood, quietly undermines every effort. It's not being malicious. It's not trying to hurt you. It genuinely believes it's protecting you, based on the data it recorded when you were too young to question what you were learning. The scarcity mind operates through several core beliefs that were installed early and reinforced constantly throughout your development. The first is the belief in limitations itself, the idea that there isn't enough to go around, that resources are scarce, that if someone else wins, you must lose. This belief is absolutely everywhere in our culture. Money doesn't grow on trees. You can't have your cake and eat it too. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Every single one of these phrases reinforces the fundamental lie that abundance is the exception rather than the rule. But look at nature for just a moment. Look at how many leaves are on a single tree, how many grains of sand on a beach. How many stars in the sky? Look at how many thoughts you can think, how many breaths you can take, how many opportunities for love, joy, and connection exist in any given day. The universe operates on abundance. Scarcity is a human invention, a mental construct, a frequency we tune to, not a fundamental truth of reality. The second core belief of scarcity consciousness is the idea that you must sacrifice to receive, that wealth requires struggle, that ease means you're doing it wrong, that if it's not hard, you don't deserve the reward. This belief is particularly insidious because it masquerades as virtue. Hard work becomes a badge of honor, even when it produces minimal results. Suffering becomes proof of worthiness, and ease, flow, and natural abundance become suspect, somehow less legitimate than what was earned through blood, sweat, and tears. Solomon didn't build his wealth through struggle. He built it through alignment. He understood that when you're operating from the frequency of wisdom, right action feels natural, opportunities appear effortlessly, and resources flow toward you instead of requiring you to chase them. This doesn't mean Solomon was lazy or passive. It means his actions were inspired rather than forced, aligned rather than desperate, flowing rather than grinding. The third belief, embedded in scarcity consciousness, is unworthiness. This is the deepest program, the one that runs underneath all the others. It's the quiet voice that says, "You're not smart enough, not talented enough, not educated enough, not connected enough, not special enough to deserve real wealth." This belief has nothing to do with your actual capacities and everything to do with what you absorbed when you were young and vulnerable. Maybe you were told you weren't good at math, and you internalized that as evidence you couldn't handle money. Maybe you watched your parents worship wealthy people while simultaneously resenting them, and you learned that having money makes you somehow morally suspect. Maybe you were praised for being humble and modest, and you confused those qualities with staying small and playing safe. Whatever the specific programming, the result is the same. A deep, subconscious belief that you don't deserve abundance, that it's meant for other people, that your job is to settle for just enough to get by. Here's what neuroscience teaches us about changing these programs. You cannot overcome subconscious beliefs through willpower or conscious effort alone. Your conscious mind, processing 40 bits of information per second, is no match for your subconscious mind processing 40 million bits per second. It's like trying to steer an aircraft carrier with a kayak paddle. The conscious mind is useful, but it's not powerful enough to override decades of subconscious programming through sheer determination. So how did Solomon reprogram his mind? How did he break free from the collective scarcity consciousness that surrounds us? He understood 3 fundamental principles that we're going to work with throughout this audiobook, and especially as you listen to these words before sleep tonight. The first principle is this: you cannot change what you cannot see. Solomon developed the capacity to observe his own thinking without being identified with it. He learned to notice when scarcity thoughts arose, not to judge them or fight them, but simply to see them clearly. This is metacognition, the ability to think about your thinking, to watch your mind without being completely absorbed in its content. When you can observe a thought rather than being the thought, you've already begun to break its power over you. Right now, I want you to simply notice your thoughts about money. Don't try to change them yet. Just observe. When you think about your bank account, what thoughts arise? When you consider your financial future, what beliefs surface? When someone mentions wealth or abundance, what's your internal response? Just notice. No judgment. No trying to force different thoughts. Simply observe what's actually there, running in the background of your consciousness. Most people never do this. They live completely identified with their thoughts. believing that whatever pops into their mind must be true, must be who they are, must be reality itself. But thoughts are just electrical impulses, neural patterns firing based on established pathways. They're not truth. They're not identity. They're just programs running based on old data. And once you can see them as programs rather than truth, everything changes. The second principle Solomon understood is that subconscious programs are changed through repetition and emotional intensity, the same way they were installed in the first place. You didn't develop scarcity consciousness through a single conversation or one negative experience. You developed it through thousands of repetitions, each one accompanied by emotion. The stress you felt when your parents fought about money, the shame when you couldn't afford what your friends had, the anxiety when bills were due and resources were short. This is why affirmations often fail. People repeat, "I am abundant," 10 times in the morning, while feeling desperate for money, while their body is flooded with the chemistry of lack, while their emotional state broadcasts scarcity. The words say one thing, but the frequency says another, and the subconscious mind responds to frequency, not to word. It responds to the emotional truth beneath the statement. To reprogram effectively, you must combine new thoughts with new feeling. This is where Solomon's wisdom becomes practical. He didn't just think abundance. He felt abundant before the wealth manifested. He cultivated the internal state of prosperity before he saw evidence of it in his external world. He understood that your emotional state is the language your subconscious speaks. And if you want to install new programming, you must speak that language fluently. This is precisely what we're doing as you listen to these words before sleep. Your brain is shifting into theta wave state, the same state where your original programming was installed. But now, you're not a helpless child, absorbing random information from your environment. You're deliberately, consciously, intentionally installing new beliefs. And you're doing it at the optimal time, when your subconscious mind is most receptive, when the critical factor of your conscious mind is quiet, when new neural pathways can be formed without resistance. The third principle Solomon mastered is that you must replace scarcity consciousness with a compelling alternative. It's not enough to simply try to stop thinking limiting thoughts. Nature abhors a vacuum. If you remove one program without installing another, your mind will default back to the familiar patterns because that's what the existing neural pathways support. You must build new pathways, stronger pathways, pathways that feel more true and more compelling than the old scarcity program. This is where the wisdom of Solomon becomes your wisdom. Instead of the belief that resources are limited, you install the truth that you live in an infinite field of potential where everything you need is already present in non-physical form, waiting to be collapsed into reality through your consciousness. Instead of the belief that wealth requires struggle, you install the understanding that alignment creates effortless flow and that your natural state is ease, not difficulty. Instead of the belief that you're unworthy, you install the truth that you are a focal point of divine consciousness, that the same intelligence that creates galaxies flows through you, that your birthright is abundance in all form. These aren't just nice-sounding ideas to make you feel better temporarily. These are fundamental truths about how reality operates, truths that Solomon understood and embodied, truths that quantum physics now confirms, truths that your own direct experience will validate once you shift your frequency. I worked with a financial advisor named David who had this profound realization about his scarcity programming. David helped wealthy clients grow their portfolios, but his own finances were always tight. He knew all the strategies, understood all the principles, had access to the same opportunities he recommended to clients, but he couldn't apply them to his own life. The sabotage was invisible but absolute. We discovered that David's father had lost the family home in a bad investment when David was 7. David had internalized the belief that investing was dangerous, that taking financial risks led to devastating consequences. So even though he rationally knew that intelligent investing creates wealth, his subconscious mind associated investing with loss and pain. Every time he considered investing his own money, anxiety flooded his system. His body said no, even when his mind said yes. The breakthrough came when David stopped trying to override his fear through logic and instead compassionately acknowledged the scared 7-year-old part of himself that was trying to prevent another devastating loss. He thanked that part for trying to protect him, and then gently he began to install new programming. He visualized himself as a wise, confident investor. He practiced feeling the emotion of financial security and growth. He deliberately created new neural pathways through repetition and emotional engagement. Within 6 months, David's personal portfolio had grown more than it had in the previous 6 years. Not because he learned new strategies, he already knew the strategies, but because he finally resolved the internal conflict between his conscious desires and his subconscious programming. He stopped fighting himself and started aligning all parts of his consciousness toward the same goal. This is what's available to you right now, in this moment, as you allow these truths to penetrate deep into your subconscious awareness. You don't need to figure out how to fix everything tonight. You don't need to have all the answers or make all the changes immediately. You simply need to begin the process of seeing your scarcity programming clearly, acknowledging it without judgment, and consistently exposing yourself to new frequencies of thought and feeling that reflect abundance rather than limitation. Every night that you listen to this audiobook, you're weakening old neural pathways and strengthening new ones. You're shifting your default frequency from scarcity to abundance. You're reprogramming your subconscious mind with truth instead of inherited limitation. This is not metaphorical work. This is neuroplasticity in action, the scientifically proven ability of your brain to rewire itself based on repeated focus and emotional intensity. Solomon didn't inherit a prosperity consciousness. He developed it. He observed his own thinking, recognized limiting patterns, and deliberately installed new programming aligned with wisdom and abundance. He understood that his mind was the ultimate wealth-generating tool, but only if properly programmed. A computer with corrupted software can't run efficiently, no matter how powerful the hardware. Your mind works the same way. The beautiful truth is that you're not stuck with the programming you received. Your brain is neuroplastic, changeable, adaptable, capable of forming new pathways at any age. The scarcity beliefs that have been running your life were learned, which means they can be unlearned. The abundance consciousness that creates wealth can be installed, cultivated, and embodied. You have the power to rewrite your own operating code. As you drift toward sleep tonight, allow this process to unfold naturally. You don't need to force anything. Your subconscious mind knows exactly what to do with the frequencies you're exposing it to. It's already beginning to recognize old scarcity programs as outdated software that no longer serves you. It's already starting to install new abundance programming that aligns with who you truly are and what you're genuinely capable of creating. Feel yourself releasing the grip of scarcity consciousness. It was never yours to begin with. It was inherited, absorbed, learned from people who themselves were operating from limitation. But you are not your parents' financial fear. You are not your childhood circumstances. You are not the sum of your past programming. You are pure consciousness with the ability to choose new thoughts, feel new emotions, and create new neural pathways that support the wealthy, wise, abundant being you were born to become. Solomon's mind became legendary, not because he was special or chosen, but because he understood these principles and applied them consistently. You have the same consciousness Solomon had. You have the same potential, the same power, the same ability to reprogram your mind and align with abundance. The only difference between where you are now and where Solomon was is frequency. The frequency you're tuned to, the programs you're running, the beliefs you're embodying, and that frequency is changing right now. With every word you absorb, every truth you allow to sink in, every moment you spend in this receptive state before sleep, you're tuning to a new station. The scarcity station is fading. The abundance station is becoming clearer. Your consciousness is shifting. Your neural pathways are rewiring. Your subconscious is opening to new possibilities. Rest in this knowing tonight. Trust the process. Allow the reprogramming to happen naturally as you sleep. Your subconscious mind is receiving these truths, integrating these frequencies, building new pathways that will serve you for the rest of your life. You are not the person you were when you began this chapter. You are already changing, already transforming, already aligning with the wisdom and wealth that is your natural inheritance. Welcome to your new operating system. Welcome to the frequency of abundance. Welcome to the reprogrammed mind that will create the wealth you've always known was possible. Chapter 3. The Quantum Field of Infinite Supply. Everything you want already exists, not as a future possibility, not as something you need to create or earn or deserve. It exists right now, in this moment, in the quantum field of infinite potential that surrounds and permeates everything. The mansion you dream of, the bank account balance you desire, the business success you envision, the financial freedom you crave, all of it exists simultaneously in the field, waiting not for you to create it, but for your consciousness to select it and collapse it into your physical reality. This isn't spiritual poetry or wishful thinking. This is quantum physics. This is the mechanics of reality that Solomon intuitively understood thousands of years before we had the scientific instruments to measure it. Solomon didn't pray to a distant god, hoping for blessings. He understood himself as a focal point of divine consciousness, operating within an infinite field where all possibilities exist simultaneously. He knew that his consciousness wasn't separate from creation. It was the very mechanism through which creation manifests. Let me explain this in a way that will fundamentally shift how you understand manifestation. In quantum physics, there's a phenomenon called superposition. Before you observe a particle, it exists in all possible states simultaneously. The famous double-slit experiment proved this beyond doubt. A particle behaves as a wave of probability until the moment of observation, at which point it collapses into a single, definite location. The observer doesn't just witness reality. The observer creates reality through the act of observation. Now apply this to your life. Right now, in the quantum field, there exists a version of you who is financially abundant, wildly successful, completely free from money worries. There also exists a version of you who struggles, who barely gets by, who lives in constant financial stress. Both exist as probability waves in the field. The version that manifests in your physical reality isn't random. It's determined by where you place your conscious and subconscious attention, by the frequency you emit, by the state of being you embody most consistently. This is what Solomon understood that most people miss entirely. He wasn't begging God for wealth. He was aligning his consciousness with the frequency where wealth already existed in the field. He was collapsing the probability wave through focused attention, elevated emotion, and absolute certainty. He understood that his consciousness was the bridge between the infinite potential of the quantum field and the concrete reality of his physical experience. Think about water for a moment. Water exists in 3 states: solid ice, liquid water, and gaseous steam. Same H2O molecules, completely different forms depending on the temperature, the frequency of molecular vibration. At low frequencies, water is solid, immovable, frozen. At higher frequencies, it flows. At even higher frequencies, it becomes vapor, invisible but omnipresent. The substance hasn't changed. Only the frequency has changed, and that frequency shift completely transforms how the substance manifests. Your financial reality works exactly the same way. Abundance isn't something separate from you that you need to attract from outside. Abundance is the high-frequency state of the same consciousness that, at low frequencies, manifests as scarcity. When you're vibrating at the frequency of fear, doubt, and limitation, your consciousness literally freezes your potential into solid, unchanging scarcity. When you shift your frequency to trust, certainty, and abundance, the same consciousness flows, moves, transforms, and manifests wealth. Solomon's wisdom was recognizing that he didn't need to become different or acquire something external. He needed to change his frequency. He needed to heat up his consciousness, so to speak, until it naturally flowed toward abundance rather than remaining frozen in limitation. This is why wisdom was his request. Wisdom is the understanding of how consciousness operates, how frequency works, how to deliberately shift your state of being to match what you desire to experience. I need you to really absorb this because it changes everything. You are not trying to get money from the universe. You are not attempting to convince some external force to give you what you want. You are learning to tune your consciousness to the frequency where the abundance you desire already exists in the quantum field. And through that tuning, you collapse the probability wave into physical manifestation. Let me tell you about Jennifer. Jennifer was a talented graphic designer who had been struggling financially for years. She worked incredibly hard, took every client she could get, stayed up late meeting deadlines, sacrificed time with her family, and yet somehow always ended up with just enough to pay bills and nothing more. She came to me frustrated, exhausted, and ready to give up on her dreams of financial freedom. When I explained the quantum field to Jennifer, something clicked. She realized she had been operating from a consciousness of chasing money, of trying to capture something outside herself, of believing that wealth was somewhere out there, and she needed to work harder to reach it. Every action she took came from the frequency of lack, the belief that she didn't have enough and needed to struggle to get more, and that frequency kept collapsing the same reality over and over again. We shifted her approach completely. Instead of working harder, Jennifer began to practice embodying the frequency of already having the financial success she desired. Before taking any action, before contacting any client, before starting any project, she would spend time feeling what it would feel like to be financially abundant, not just thinking about it, but actually generating the elevated emotions of gratitude, freedom, and joy that would naturally accompany that reality. Here's what's crucial to understand. When Jennifer felt those emotions, her brain and heart generated a specific electromagnetic signal. That signal went out into the quantum field like a radio broadcast. And just as a radio station broadcasts at a specific frequency that radios can tune to, Jennifer's consciousness was broadcasting a frequency that the quantum field could respond to. She wasn't asking for abundance. She was becoming the frequency of abundance. She wasn't hoping for wealth. She was embodying the state of being wealthy. Within 3 months, Jennifer's income had tripled, not because she worked 3 times harder. Actually, she was working less and enjoying it more, but because her frequency had changed, and from that new frequency, different opportunities appeared. Clients she had never imagined working with reached out to her. Projects that paid significantly more materialized effortlessly. Referrals multiplied. The money wasn't coming because she deserved it more or worked harder. The money was flowing because she had tuned her consciousness to the frequency where that financial reality already existed in the quantum field. This is the secret Solomon understood. The quantum field is neutral. It doesn't judge whether you deserve abundance or scarcity. It simply responds to frequency. It mirrors back to you the state of being you're most consistently embodying. If you're consistently in the frequency of "I don't have enough," the field says, "You're right, you don't have enough," and maintains that reality. If you're consistently in the frequency of "I am abundant," the field says, "You're right, you are abundant," and manifests evidence of that truth. Most people have this completely backwards. They think they'll feel abundant once they have money. They believe they'll feel successful after they achieve their goal. They're waiting for their external reality to change so their internal state can shift. But quantum physics proves the opposite. Your internal state creates your external reality. Your consciousness doesn't respond to the physical world. The physical world responds to your consciousness. This is why affirmations without emotional shift accomplish nothing. You can repeat, "I am wealthy," 1,000 times, but if you're feeling desperate while you say it, if your body is tensed with anxiety, if your heart is broadcasting the frequency of lack, you're not tuning to the abundance channel in the quantum field. You're just making noise. The field responds to frequency, not to word. It responds to the coherence between what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what you're believing at the deepest level. Solomon didn't just think about wisdom and wealth. He embodied them. He felt them as already present. He moved through his day from the consciousness of someone who already possessed what he desired. And because he maintained that frequency consistently, the quantum field had no choice but to match it with corresponding physical experiences. This isn't magic. This is mechanics. This is how reality actually works, beneath the surface of what we can see and touch. The quantum field operates according to specific principles that you can learn and apply. The first principle is that the field exists in the eternal now. It has no concept of past or future. It only knows present tense. So when you say, "I will be wealthy someday," the field registers someday, which by definition means not now. The field keeps wealth in the future, always out of reach, because that's the instruction your consciousness is broadcasting. Solomon understood this. He didn't affirm, "I will be wise," or "I hope to be prosperous." He claimed it in present tense. He thought from the end result. He lived as if the desired reality was already true, because, in the quantum field, it was already true. It was simply waiting for his consciousness to select it, focus on it, and feel it as real long enough for it to collapse into physical form. The second principle of the quantum field is that it responds to coherence. Coherence means all parts of you are aligned, broadcasting the same signal. Your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and actions are all tuned to the same frequency. When there's coherence, the signal going into the field is strong, clear, and unmistakable. When there's incoherence, when you want wealth but believe you're unworthy, when you desire success but fear failure, when you affirm abundance but feel anxious, the signal is muddy, conflicted, and weak. Think of coherence like this. Imagine you're trying to tune a radio. but 10 different people are each turning the dial in a different direction. You'll get static, noise, fragmented signals from multiple stations, but no clear reception of any single station. That's what happens when your consciousness lacks coherence. Your conscious mind wants one thing, your subconscious believes another, your emotions broadcast a third message, and your actions reflect a fourth. The quantum field receives mixed signals and manifests mixed results. Some success mixed with struggle, some abundance mixed with lack, some progress mixed with setback. Solomon achieved extraordinary wealth because he achieved extraordinary coherence. Every level of his consciousness was aligned. His thoughts reflected wisdom. His emotions embodied abundance. His beliefs supported prosperity. His actions flowed from certainty. There was no internal conflict, no self-sabotage, no mixed signals. The frequency going into the quantum field was clear, strong, and consistent, and the field responded by manifesting matching experiences. This is what we're cultivating as you listen to these words before sleep. Your conscious mind is receiving these truths. Your subconscious mind, in its receptive theta state, is beginning to align with these new patterns. Your emotional body is starting to feel the possibility of abundance. And over time, with repetition and focus, all parts of you will come into coherence, broadcasting a unified signal into the quantum field that can only manifest as wealth, success, and prosperity. The third principle of the quantum field is that it responds to sustained frequency, not occasional effort. You can't feel abundant for 5 minutes a day and expect the field to reorganize your entire financial reality. The field responds to your dominant frequency, the state you live in most consistently. If you spend 5 minutes visualizing wealth and 23 hours and 55 minutes worrying about bills, your dominant frequency is worry, and that's what manifests. This is why changing your life requires changing your identity, not just your actions. Solomon didn't practice being wise for an hour each morning and then return to foolish thinking the rest of the day. Wisdom became his identity. Prosperity became his natural state. Abundance became his default frequency. He lived from that consciousness so consistently that it became automatic, unconscious, his new normal. You're working toward the same transformation. Right now, scarcity might be your default frequency, the channel you automatically tune to without conscious effort. But every night you spend absorbing these truths. Every moment you practice feeling abundant before you see evidence of it. Every time you catch yourself in scarcity thinking and consciously shift to abundance consciousness, you're building new neural pathways. You're making prosperity your new default. You're training your consciousness to automatically tune to the abundance channel in the quantum field. Understand this clearly. The quantum field is not separate from you. You're not outside of it looking in. You are in it. You are of it. You are a localized expression of the same infinite consciousness that creates galaxies, grows trees from seeds, and heals wounds without conscious instruction. The same intelligence that orchestrates the orbits of planets and the cycles of seasons is the intelligence flowing through you right now. You're not disconnected from the creative power of the universe. You are that creative power, focused into this particular human experience. Solomon recognized himself as an individualized expression of infinite consciousness. He didn't see himself as separate from the source of abundance. He understood that wisdom, wealth, and all resources didn't come from outside him. They flowed through him because he was a focal point of the same consciousness that creates everything. This recognition changed everything. When you know yourself as the creative force, rather than as a powerless recipient hoping for blessing, your entire relationship with manifestation transforms. There's a practice I want you to begin implementing, starting tonight as you drift. Close your eyes and feel the quantum field around you. It's not empty space. It's a living field of infinite potential, pregnant with every possibility, responsive to conscious. Feel yourself floating in this field, surrounded by it, permeated by it. Recognize that this field contains every version of your life simultaneously. Now focus on the version where you are financially abundant. Don't visualize it as something separate or distant. Feel it as a probability wave existing right now in the field around you. It's not in the future. It's not somewhere else. It's here, now, in superposition with all other possibilities. Your consciousness is what collapses it into reality. Your sustained attention and elevated emotion are what select this particular probability and bring it into physical form. Feel gratitude for this abundant version of you. Feel joy as if it's already manifested. Feel the relief of financial freedom. Feel the excitement of unlimited resources. Don't wait for evidence to feel these emotions. Generate them now, from nothing, because in the quantum field, these emotions are the currency that purchases your desired reality. They're not the result of abundance. They're the cause of it. As you maintain this practice night after night, you're training your consciousness to live in the frequency of the reality you desire. You're conditioning your subconscious to accept abundance as normal, natural, inevitable. You're programming your nervous system to feel comfortable with wealth instead of unconsciously pushing it away. You're aligning every level of your being with the version of you that already exists in the quantum field. Already successful, already prosperous, already free. Solomon's wealth wasn't luck or divine favoritism. It was the natural result of consciousness aligned with abundance, operating with full awareness of the quantum field and how to navigate it. You have the same quantum field available to you. You have the same consciousness flowing through you. You have the same power to collapse probability waves through focused attention and elevated emotion. The only difference between where you are and where Solomon was is frequency. And frequency is something you can change, starting right now, in this moment. Rest in this knowing tonight. You are not separate from infinite supply. You are not disconnected from abundance. You are a focal point of the same consciousness that manifests everything, and that consciousness is ready to flow through you as unlimited prosperity. The quantum field is already responding to your shifting frequency. The wealth you desire already exists, waiting only for your consciousness to claim it, feel it, embody it, and allow it to manifest. Sleep with the certainty that you are held in an infinite field of potential where everything you need already exists. Dream from the frequency of abundance. Wake up tomorrow one step closer to embodying the prosperous consciousness that is your birthright and your natural state. The quantum field has heard your new signal. The transformation has already begun. Chapter 4. The Architecture of Prosperous Thoughts. Your thoughts are not random electrical impulses firing aimlessly through your brain. They are structured patterns of energy that literally build the architecture of your reality. Every thought you think creates a neural pathway, and every time you think that thought again, you strengthen that pathway. Think the same thought enough times, and it becomes a superhighway in your brain. Automatic, unconscious, your default way of perceiving and responding to the world. This is the architecture of your mind, and this architecture determines everything about your financial reality. Solomon understood something profound that most people never grasp. Wealthy people don't just think different thoughts than poor people. They think from a completely different structure of consciousness. Their thoughts are organized differently, connected differently, built on different foundations. It's not that they occasionally think a positive thought about money, while poor people think negative thoughts. It's that their entire mental architecture supports wealth creation, while most people's mental architecture systematically blocks it. Imagine two houses built on the same plot of land. One house has a solid foundation, proper structural support, quality materials, and sound engineering. The other house looks fine from the outside, but it's built on sand with weak supports and inferior material. Both houses might look similar initially, but when storms come, and storms always come, only the house with proper architecture survives. Your thoughts work the same way. You can paint a beautiful facade of positive thinking on the surface, but if the underlying architecture is built on scarcity, fear, and limitation, your financial reality will collapse under pressure every single time. Let me show you the difference between surface-level thinking and architectural thinking. A person with poor mental architecture might think, "I want to be rich." That's a surface thought, a wish, a desire with no structural support. A person with prosperous mental architecture thinks, "Money flows to me because I provide value, because I operate from abundance consciousness, because I am aligned with prosperity." Do you feel the difference? The first thought is passive, hope-based, disconnected from cause and effect. The second thought is structured, causal, rooted in principles that support manifestation. Solomon's thoughts had architecture. When he looked at a situation, he didn't just react emotionally or hope for the best. He observed the underlying patterns, identified the principles at work, and thought from a level of consciousness that saw connections most people miss. This is wisdom, not just knowing information, but understanding the structure beneath the information, seeing how things connect, recognizing patterns that repeat across different domains. Let me tell you about Richard, an entrepreneur who came to me after his third business failure. Richard was intelligent, hard-working, and knowledgeable about business principles. He could recite every success strategy in every book he'd read, but his businesses kept failing, and he couldn't understand why. When we examined his thought architecture, the problem became immediately obvious. Richard's thoughts were built on a foundation of proving himself. Every business decision was filtered through the question, "Will this make me look successful?" His mental architecture was organized around external validation rather than internal alignment. He would pursue opportunities not because they felt right or aligned with his strengths, but because they would impress others. He would make financial decisions based on what successful people were supposed to do rather than what his intuition told him was wise. His thought structure was fundamentally reactive, defensive, built on a foundation of not being enough. Compare that to Solomon's mental architecture. Solomon's thoughts were built on a foundation of sufficiency and wisdom. Every decision was filtered through the question, "Is this wise?" His mental structure was organized around alignment with principles rather than reaction to circumstances or opinions. He pursued opportunities because they resonated with deeper truth, not because they would prove something to someone else. His thought architecture was proactive, creative, built on a foundation of already being enough. Do you see how these two different architectures would create completely different results? Richard's mental structure guaranteed struggle because every thought was contaminated by the need to prove, defend, or validate. Solomon's mental structure guaranteed prosperity because every thought was aligned with wisdom, truth, and natural principles. Same intelligence, same work ethic, completely different foundations, and therefore completely different outcome. The first principle of building prosperous thought architecture is establishing the right foundation. And the foundation of all prosperous thinking is this simple truth. You are already whole, already worthy, already enough, not because of what you've achieved or accumulated, but because of what you are, consciousness itself, divine intelligence in human form, a focal point of infinite creative potential. This isn't feel-good affirmation. This is the fundamental truth that must underlie every thought, if you want those thoughts to create prosperity rather than perpetual seeking. Most people's thought architecture is built on a foundation of incompleteness. When I have money, then I'll be enough. When I achieve success, then I'll be worthy. When I prove myself, then I'll be valuable. Every thought built on this foundation carries the frequency of lack, no matter how positive the words sound. You can think, I am abundant, all day long. But if underneath that thought is the belief, I'm not enough until I'm abundant, you're building on sand. The foundation is flawed, and the structure will collapse. Solomon's foundation was different. He knew himself as an expression of divine wisdom before he had any external evidence. He claimed his worthiness not as a goal to achieve, but as a truth to recognize. And from that foundation, every thought he built was structurally sound. When he thought about wealth, it wasn't from a place of, I need this to be complete. It was from a place of, this is a natural expression of who I already am. Do you feel how that shift in foundation changes everything? The second principle of prosperous thought architecture is proper connection between thoughts. Your thoughts don't exist in isolation. They form networks, patterns, structures that reinforce each other. Wealthy people have thought networks, where abundance thoughts automatically trigger more abundance thoughts. They think about money, and their brain automatically connects it to opportunity, possibility, growth, freedom. Poor people have thought networks where money thoughts automatically trigger fear, scarcity, anxiety, limitation. This is neuroplasticity in action. Every time two thoughts fire together in your brain, they wire together. Think about money while feeling anxious enough times, and your brain creates a permanent highway between the concept of money and the emotion of anxiety. After that, you can't think about money without automatically feeling anxious. It's not a choice anymore. It's automatic architecture, unconscious wiring, default programming. Solomon deliberately built thought connections that supported prosperity. He connected wisdom to wealth. So every time he sought wisdom, his brain automatically associated it with abundance. He connected giving to receiving. So generosity triggered expectation of increase rather than fear of loss. He connected faith to manifestation. So trust automatically activated creative power rather than passive waiting. These weren't random connections. They were deliberately constructed neural networks that made prosperity consciousness automatic. Here's a practice that will begin restructuring your thought architecture starting tonight. When you think about money or wealth, deliberately connect it to positive emotions and empowering meanings. Money equals freedom. Money equals possibility. Money equals the ability to serve and contribute. Money equals creative expression. Don't let your brain default to the old connections. Money equals stress. Money equals scarcity. Money equals anxiety. Actively interrupt those patterns and build new ones. Every single time you catch yourself thinking a thought about money connected to fear or limitation, pause. Don't judge yourself. Don't fight the thought. Simply observe it. Recognize it as old architecture based on flawed foundation, and consciously choose to build a new connection. Money isn't stress. Money is freedom. Money isn't scarce. Money flows abundantly. Money isn't anxiety. Money is peace, because I trust in infinite supply. You're rewiring your brain, one thought connection at a time. The third principle of prosperous thought architecture is directional thinking. Every thought is either moving you toward prosperity or away from it. There's no neutral. Thoughts that focus on what you don't want, what you fear, what might go wrong. These thoughts have direction away from wealth, even if you're thinking them in an attempt to protect yourself or avoid problem. Thoughts that focus on what you desire, what's possible, what you're creating. These thoughts have direction toward wealth. Solomon's thoughts were always directional toward wisdom and abundance. He didn't spend mental energy worrying about what enemies might do or what could go wrong. He focused his consciousness on what he was building, what wisdom would create, what prosperity would look like. His thought direction was forward, creative, generative, and because energy flows where attention goes, his directional thinking created directional results, always moving toward greater wisdom and wealth. Most people's thought direction is chaotic. They think about what they want for a moment, then spend an hour thinking about why it won't work. They focus on their goal briefly, then obsess about obstacles for the rest of the day. They imagine success occasionally, then replay failures constantly. Their thought direction is scattered, contradictory, without clear momentum, and the universe, responding to the dominant direction of their consciousness, creates scattered, contradictory results without clear progress. I worked with a woman named Patricia, who was a master of misdirected thinking. Patricia wanted financial freedom desperately. She could describe her ideal life in vivid detail, but 90% of her mental energy was spent thinking about her current lack, analyzing past financial mistakes, worrying about future bills, and imagining worst-case scenarios. Her thought direction was overwhelmingly pointed at scarcity, even though she consciously desired abundance, and her reality perfectly reflected her dominant thought direction. More scarcity, more struggle, more evidence that money was difficult. We restructured Patricia's thought architecture by establishing clear directional thinking. Instead of analyzing what went wrong, she practiced thinking about what she was learning. Instead of worrying about bills, she focused on opportunities to increase income. Instead of imagining disasters, she deliberately visualized desired outcome. We didn't eliminate awareness of challenges. We changed the direction she faced while thinking about them. She learned to think about problems while facing toward solutions, rather than facing toward fear. Within months, Patricia's financial situation transformed, not because circumstances magically changed, but because her thought direction changed, and that directional shift created different actions, different opportunities, different results. She was using the same amount of mental energy, but now that energy was flowing in a productive direction, rather than scattering in all directions or flowing toward what she didn't want. The fourth principle of prosperous thought architecture is structural integrity. This means all parts of your thinking are aligned, supporting each other rather than contradicting each other. You can't think, "I am abundant," while simultaneously thinking, "I can't afford that," or "money comes easily," while also thinking, "I have to work so hard for every dollar." These contradictory thoughts create structural weakness in your mental architecture. The house looks fine until pressure comes, and then the contradictions cause collapse. Solomon's thinking had perfect structural integrity. His thoughts about wisdom aligned with his thoughts about wealth. His thoughts about giving aligned with his thoughts about receiving. His thoughts about faith aligned with his thoughts about action. There were no internal contradictions weakening his mental structure. Every thought supported and reinforced every other thought, creating a mental architecture so strong that nothing could shake it. Building structural integrity requires ruthless honesty about your contradictory beliefs. You must identify where your thoughts conflict with each other and resolve those conflicts. If you affirm abundance but believe wealthy people are greedy, you have a structural contradiction. If you desire financial freedom but believe money is the root of evil, you have a structural contradiction. If you claim to trust the universe but constantly worry about money, you have a structural contradiction. These contradictions must be resolved if you want your mental architecture to support prosperity. The resolution isn't about forcing yourself to believe something you don't believe. It's about examining your beliefs, questioning their validity, and consciously choosing beliefs that serve you. You don't have to believe money is evil just because someone told you that as a child. You don't have to believe wealthy people are greedy just because you saw examples of greed. You can choose to believe that money is a tool for good, that wealth enables contribution, that prosperity consciousness is available to everyone, including you. You can choose structural integrity over inherited contradictions. The fifth principle of prosperous thought architecture is elevation. Prosperous thoughts don't exist at the same level as problem consciousness. They exist at a higher level, a broader perspective, a more expansive awareness. Einstein said you can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. Solomon understood this instinctively. He didn't think about challenges from within the challenge. He elevated his thinking above the challenge to see patterns, possibilities, and solutions that weren't visible from ground level. When you're thinking from survival consciousness, obsessed with immediate problems and short-term concerns, your thought architecture is low level. It might keep you alive, but it will never create prosperity. Prosperous thought architecture exists at an elevated level where you see long-term patterns, where you recognize principles instead of just reacting to circumstances, where you think in terms of systems and structures rather than isolated incidents. Imagine you're lost in a forest. From ground level, every direction looks the same. You can't see where you came from or where you're going. You're trapped in immediate confusion. But if you could elevate yourself above the trees, suddenly you'd see the entire landscape, see where you are, see the path out. Elevated thinking does the same thing for your financial reality. It lifts you above the immediate confusion of circumstances so you can see the patterns, recognize the path, make decisions from wisdom rather than panic. Solomon's thinking was perpetually elevated. He didn't make decisions based on immediate emotions or short-term gain. He thought from a level of consciousness that saw long-term consequences, recognized underlying principles, and aligned with eternal truths. This elevated architecture is what made his wisdom legendary and his wealth inevitable. He simply couldn't think from a level that would create poverty, because his mental architecture existed too far above that frequency. As you absorb these principles tonight, your thought architecture is already beginning to shift. Your foundation is being examined and rebuilt on truth rather than lack. Your thought connections are being rewired to associate prosperity with positive emotions and meaning. Your directional thinking is being clarified to consistently move toward what you desire. Your structural integrity is being strengthened by resolving contradictions. Your consciousness is being elevated above problem-level thinking to solution-level awareness. This isn't instant. Architecture takes time to build. But every night you spend with these truths, every moment you consciously choose empowering thoughts over limiting ones, every time you catch yourself thinking from old structures and deliberately think from new ones, you're constructing mental architecture that can support unlimited prosperity. You're creating thought structures so strong that no circumstance can shake them. You're becoming the architect of your own consciousness, deliberately designing a mind that generates wealth as naturally as a well-designed building provides shelter. Solomon didn't inherit his mental architecture. He built it deliberately and consistently through conscious choice and sustained focus. You're doing the same thing right now. With every principle you integrate, every old pattern you release, Every new thought structure you build, you're moving closer to the consciousness that creates effortless prosperity. Your thoughts are being organized according to principles that actually work, foundations that actually hold, directions that actually reach desired destinations. Rest tonight, knowing that your mental architecture is under construction. The old structures built on fear and limitation are being demolished. New structures built on wisdom and abundance are rising in their place. Your thoughts are being rewired, reconnected, redirected, elevated. The mind you wake with tomorrow will be slightly different from the mind you had today. And over time, thought by thought, connection by connection, these shifts compound into total transformation. You are not your current thoughts. You are the consciousness that can observe, evaluate, and reconstruct those thoughts. You are the architect, and your mind is the building site. Choose your foundation wisely. Connect your thoughts deliberately. Direct your mental energy consciously. Build with structural integrity. Elevate your perspective. And watch as the architecture you create in consciousness manifests as prosperity in your physical reality. This is Solomon's wisdom. This is your power. This is the transformation already underway. Chapter 5. Emotional Alchemy and Wealth Magnetism. Your emotions are not just feelings that happen to you. They are electromagnetic signatures that broadcast your vibrational state into the quantum field with measurable precision. Every emotion generates a specific frequency that either attracts or repels the financial reality you desire. This is not metaphor. This is measurable science. The Institute of Heart Math has proven that your heart generates an electromagnetic field 5,000 times more powerful than your brain, and this field extends several feet beyond your body, interacting with the fields of everything and everyone around. Your emotions are the invisible but incredibly potent force that either magnetizes wealth toward you or pushes it away, regardless of what your conscious mind thinks it wants. Solomon understood this alchemy before science could measure it. He recognized that wisdom without emotional mastery was incomplete, that knowledge without the right feeling state was powerless. He knew that his emotional frequency determined what manifested in his life far more than his thoughts, strategies, or actions. This is why he cultivated specific emotional states, not because they felt good, though they did, but because they were the vibrational match to the abundance he intended to experience. Let me be completely clear about something most people get wrong. Your emotions don't respond to your external circumstances. Your circumstances respond to your emotions. You've been taught backward. You've been conditioned to believe that you'll feel wealthy when you have money, feel successful when you achieve goals, feel abundant when evidence appears in your bank account. But that's the exact opposite of how manifestation actually works. You must feel wealthy before money comes. You must feel successful before evidence appears. You must embody the emotional frequency of abundance before the quantum field can deliver corresponding circumstances. This is the alchemy Solomon mastered. He didn't wait for his kingdom to be prosperous before feeling prosperous. He generated the emotional state of prosperity first, and that emotional frequency created the magnetic pull that organized circumstances, opportunities, and resources into manifestation. He understood that emotion is the language the universe speaks, the currency that purchases reality, the signal that determines what collapses from potential into physical form. Think about a magnet for a moment. A magnet doesn't chase metal. It doesn't beg, plead, or work hard to attract. It simply is magnetic, and metal is drawn to it automatically, effortlessly, inevitably. Your emotional state works exactly the same way. When you embody the emotional frequency of wealth, genuine gratitude, authentic joy, deep peace, excited anticipation, you become magnetic to money, opportunities, and abundance. You don't have to chase anything. Your frequency does the attracting. But when you're emitting the emotional frequency of lack, anxiety, fear, desperation, worry, you become magnetic to more situations that generate those same emotions. The universe doesn't judge your emotions as good or bad. It simply matches them. It gives you more experiences that correspond to whatever frequency you're consistently broadcasting. This is why people in desperate need of money rarely attract it, while people who already feel abundant continue to attract more abundance. It's not unfair. It's frequency. It's magnetism. It's the mechanics of how reality responds to emotional states. I need to tell you about Michael, because his story perfectly illustrates this principle. Michael was a financial advisor drowning in debt. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was advising clients on wealth building while his own finances were a disaster. He knew every strategy, every investment principle, every wealth-building technique, but knowledge wasn't his problem. His emotional frequency was his problem. Michael woke up every morning with anxiety gripping his chest. He checked his bank account with dread. He thought about bills with fear. He imagined his financial future with worry. Every single day, he was broadcasting the emotional frequency of lack into the quantum field, and every single day, the field delivered more circumstances that matched that frequency. More unexpected expenses, more clients canceling, more opportunities falling through. Not because the universe was punishing him, but because his emotional state was magnetizing experiences that matched his dominant feelings. When Michael came to me, I didn't teach him new financial strategies. I taught him emotional alchemy, the art of transmuting lower-frequency emotions into higher-frequency states that magnetically attract what he desired. The process was simple, but not easy. He had to stop letting his circumstances dictate his emotions and start using his emotions to create new circumstances. We began with gratitude, the foundational emotion of all prosperity consciousness. But not fake gratitude, not forced positivity, not pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Real gratitude, genuine appreciation for what was already present. Michael started his day by feeling authentic gratitude for his health, his knowledge, his ability to help clients, the roof over his head, the food he could eat, not as a technique to get something, but as a genuine shift in what he chose to focus on and feel. Here's what happened in Michael's brain and body when he practiced genuine gratitude. His heart rate became coherent, his stress hormones decreased, his immune system strengthened, and most importantly, his electromagnetic field shifted to a higher frequency. That shift in frequency changed what he attracted. Within weeks, new clients appeared. Old clients returned. Unexpected money manifested. His circumstances didn't change because he worked harder or learned new strategies. His circumstances changed because his emotional frequency changed, and the quantum field responded to his new signal. This is the alchemy available to you right now. You can transmute any lower frequency emotion into a higher frequency state through conscious choice and deliberate practice. Fear can be transmuted into trust. Anxiety can be transmuted into peace. Desperation can be transmuted into certainty. Lack can be transmuted into abundance. Not by denying what you feel, but by choosing to feel something different, something that matches what you desire to experience. Solomon practiced this alchemy constantly. When challenges arose, and they certainly did, even for the wisest king, he didn't allow circumstances to dictate his emotional state. He chose his emotions based on the outcome he intended to create. If he wanted peace in his kingdom, he first embodied peace in his own being. If he wanted prosperity for his people, he first generated the feeling of prosperity within himself. He understood that his emotional state was the template, and reality was the copy. Get the template right, and the copy follows automatically. The first emotion you must master is gratitude. Gratitude is the frequency that tells the universe, "I have received," and the universe, responding to that signal, delivers more to be grateful for. But gratitude must be genuine, felt in your body, not just recited in your mind. When you feel real gratitude, your heart rhythm becomes coherent, creating a powerful electromagnetic signal that the quantum field receives and matches. Practice this right now, even as you listen to these words. Think of something in your life you're genuinely grateful for. Not something you should be grateful for, but something that actually generates the feeling of gratitude when you focus on it. Maybe it's a person you love. Maybe it's an ability you have. Maybe it's something simple like the comfort of your bed or the taste of your favorite food. Focus on that thing and let the feeling of gratitude fill your chest. Feel it warming your heart. Let it expand through your body. This is not mental exercise. This is generating an electromagnetic frequency that is literally changing the field around you right now. When you can generate gratitude without needing external circumstances to trigger it, you've mastered one of the most powerful frequencies in manifestation. Solomon felt grateful not after he received abundance, but in anticipation of it. He felt thankful before evidence appeared, because he understood that the feeling of gratitude was what attracted the evidence in the first place. Gratitude isn't the result of abundance. It's the cause of it. The second emotion essential to wealth magnetism is joy. Not happiness that depends on external circumstances, but joy that wells up from within, regardless of what's happening around you. Joy is a high-frequency emotion that tells the universe you're already complete, already fulfilled, already living in abundance. And when you broadcast that frequency, the universe must match it with corresponding experiences. Most people have this backward. They think joy will come after success, after money arrives, after circumstances improve. But joy that depends on circumstances is fragile, temporary, and powerless to create lasting change. Joy that you generate from within, regardless of circumstances, is invincible and magnetic. It broadcasts a frequency that says, "I am already abundant," and the quantum field responding to that signal manifests more evidence of the abundance you're already embodying. Solomon was described as having a joyful heart, not because everything went perfectly in his kingdom. Ruling comes with constant challenges, but because he chose joy as his default emotional state. He found things to delight in, reasons to feel good, aspects of life to appreciate and enjoy. And that consistent frequency of joy attracted more circumstances worthy of joy. He created an upward spiral where joy attracted joyful experiences, which reinforced the joy, which attracted more joyful experiences. This is the magnetic power of sustained high-frequency emotion. The third emotion you must cultivate is peace. Peace is the frequency of trust, the signal that you're not in survival mode, the electromagnetic signature that tells the universe you know everything is working out. When you're in a state of genuine peace, your body comes out of fight or flight, your nervous system regulates, your heart becomes coherent, and your electromagnetic field stabilizes at a frequency that magnetizes stability and abundance. Anxiety is the enemy of manifestation. When you're anxious, your body is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, your heart rhythm becomes incoherent, and your electromagnetic field broadcasts chaos. The quantum field Receiving that chaotic signal delivers chaotic circumstances. This is why anxious people experience constant problems, unexpected disasters, and perpetual instability, not because they're unlucky, but because their emotional frequency is creating the template for that exact kind of experience. Solomon cultivated deep peace through his connection to wisdom. He understood that wisdom sees beyond immediate circumstances to eternal principles. He knew that temporary challenges couldn't shake ultimate outcome. He trusted that the same intelligence that created everything was orchestrating his life, and that trust generated unshakable peace. That peace was magnetic. It attracted loyal advisors, stable alliances, and prosperous trade. His peaceful frequency created peaceful circumstances. You can cultivate this same peace starting tonight. As you drift towards sleep, practice releasing into trust. Feel your body relaxing completely. Release the need to control outcomes. Release anxiety about the future. Release worry about how things will work out. Instead, generate the feeling of deep trust. Trust that you're guided. Trust that everything is unfolding perfectly. Trust that the universe is responding to your frequency with matching circumstances. This trust isn't naive. It's based on understanding how manifestation actually works. You trust because you know your emotional frequency creates your reality, and you're choosing a frequency that creates peace and abundance. The fourth emotion essential to wealth magnetism is excitement. Excitement is the frequency of anticipation, the feeling that something wonderful is about to happen, the emotional state that tells the universe you're ready to receive. When you feel genuine excitement about your financial future, you're broadcasting a signal that magnetizes opportunities, synchronicities, and manifestation. But excitement must be real, felt in your body, not just intellectually imagined. When you think about your abundant future, does your heart rate quicken with positive anticipation? Do you feel a smile forming? Does your body feel energized? These physical sensations are the electromagnetic frequency of excitement, and they're incredibly magnetic. This is why passionate people attract opportunities. Their excitement generates a frequency that others can feel and are drawn to. Solomon approached his projects with excitement. He wasn't bored or going through the motions. He was genuinely excited about building the temple, creating prosperity for his people, expanding wisdom and understanding. That excitement was contagious and magnetic. It attracted the best craftsmen, the finest materials, and the most generous contributions. People wanted to be part of what he was creating because they could feel his excited frequency, and that frequency made them want to participate. Practice generating excitement about your financial future. Not fake enthusiasm or forced positivity, but genuine excitement about what you're creating. Imagine your bank account growing. Feel the excitement of that vision. Imagine opportunities flowing to you. Feel the excitement of that possibility. Imagine yourself living in financial freedom. Feel the excitement of that reality. This isn't wishful thinking. This is generating the electromagnetic frequency that makes those visions manifest. You're not excited because it happened. You're excited, and therefore, it will happen. The fifth emotion in this alchemical formula is love. Love is the highest frequency, the most powerful magnetic force in existence. When you feel genuine love for yourself, for others, for life itself, you broadcast a frequency that the quantum field must match with abundant, beautiful experiences. Love dissolves fear, transmutes lack, and opens channels for manifestation that nothing else can access. Solomon understood that wisdom and love were inseparable. He loved his people, loved wisdom itself, loved the creative process of building something meaningful. That love generated a frequency that attracted loyalty, support, resources, and opportunities. Love made him magnetic in ways that strategy or manipulation never could. People served him not out of fear, but out of genuine affection and respect for what he embodied. You must learn to love money itself, not worship it or become enslaved to it, but genuinely love it for what it is, a form of energy that facilitates exchange, enables creation, and allows contribution. When you love money, you stop resenting it, stop fearing it, stop feeling conflicted about it. You embrace it as a welcome friend, and that loving frequency makes you magnetic to it. Money flows toward people who love it and appreciate it, just as everything flows toward love. Here's the practice that will transform your emotional frequency and activate your wealth magnetism. Every morning before you get out of bed and every night before you sleep, spend time deliberately generating these 5 emotions: gratitude, joy, peace, excitement, and love. Don't wait for circumstances to trigger these feelings. Generate them from nothing, from pure choice, from conscious intention. Feel them in your body. Let them expand through your chest. Hold each emotion for at least 30 seconds, long enough for your heart rhythm to shift and your electromagnetic field to change. This practice might feel awkward at first because you're used to letting circumstances create your emotions rather than using your emotions to create circumstances. But this is the alchemy Solomon mastered. This is the magnetic power that attracts wealth. This is the frequency that tells the quantum field what to manifest in your life. Your emotions are not reactions. They're creations. They're not effects. They're causes. They're not results. They're templates. As you practice this alchemy night after night, your baseline emotional frequency will shift. What once required conscious effort will become automatic. The emotions that currently feel difficult to access will become your natural state. You'll find yourself spontaneously feeling grateful instead of anxious, joyful instead of stressed, peaceful instead of worried, excited instead of dreading, loving instead of fearful. And as your emotional frequency shifts, your external circumstances must shift to match. Solomon's wealth wasn't created by strategies alone. It was magnetized by his emotional frequency. He embodied prosperity before it manifested. He felt abundant before he saw evidence. He generated the emotions of success before circumstances proved him successful. And because he sustained that frequency consistently, the quantum field had no choice but to match it with corresponding physical experiences. You have the same power. Your heart generates the same electromagnetic field. Your emotions broadcast the same signals into the quantum field. You can transmute any lower frequency emotion into a higher frequency state through conscious choice. You can generate feelings that magnetize wealth regardless of current circumstances. You can embody abundance before evidence appears. This is not positive thinking. This is emotional alchemy. This is the science of manifestation. This is Solomon's wisdom applied to your financial transformation. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, let yourself feel truly wealthy. Not someday wealthy, not theoretically wealthy, but wealthy right now in this moment. Feel the peace that comes with financial security. Feel the joy that comes with unlimited resources. Feel the excitement of infinite possibilities. Feel the gratitude for abundance already present. Feel the love for money as a welcomed friend. Hold these frequencies as you fall asleep, and let your subconscious mind broadcast this into the quantum field for 8 hours of uninterrupted magnetism. Your emotions are creating your reality right now. Every feeling you generate is an instruction to the universe. Every frequency you broadcast is magnetizing corresponding experiences. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are an emotional alchemist with the power to transmute any state into any other state, to choose frequencies that create wealth instead of lack, to embody emotions that magnetize abundance instead of repelling it. This is your power. This is Solomon's wisdom. This is the transformation already underway in your electromagnetic field and your financial reality. Chapter 6. The Wisdom of Aligned Action. There's a profound difference between action that comes from desperation and action that flows from alignment. Most people exhaust themselves taking massive action from a state of fear, lack, and urgency, wondering why they work so hard, yet remain financially stuck. Solomon understood something they don't. The quality of your action matters infinitely more than the quantity. One aligned action creates more results than 1,000 desperate efforts. One step taken from wisdom generates more wealth than years of grinding from anxiety. This is not laziness or passivity. This is the intelligence of knowing when to move, how to move, and from what state of consciousness to take action. Solomon never acted from desperation. He never made decisions from panic or moved from a place of scarcity. Every action he took was preceded by wisdom, aligned with divine timing, and infused with the certainty of someone who understood that right action at the right time from the right consciousness creates effortless results. This is the missing piece in most manifestation teaching, the bridge between consciousness and creation, the practical application of elevated states, the art of translating inner transformation into outer demonstration. Let me be direct with you. You can have perfect thoughts, elevated emotions, and beautiful visualizations, but if your actions contradict the consciousness you're cultivating, you'll sabotage every manifestation before it fully forms. Your actions are the physical expression of your consciousness. They're how the invisible becomes visible, how potential becomes actual, how the quantum field translates into physical reality. If your consciousness says, "I am abundant," but your actions scream, "I'm terrified of lack," the universe receives mixed signals and delivers mixed results. The first principle of aligned action is that it must flow from elevated consciousness rather than from survival instinct. When you act from survival, from fear, desperation, or anxiety, you're operating from the oldest, most primitive part of your brain. This survival brain sees the world as dangerous, resources as scarce, and other people as competition or threat. Actions from this state are defensive, reactive, forced. They exhaust you because they're fighting against the natural flow of abundance, rather than moving with it. Solomon's actions came from a completely different source. They flowed from wisdom consciousness, which sees abundance everywhere, recognizes divine timing, and understands that the universe is inherently supportive. From this elevated state, action feels inspired rather than forced, natural rather than desperate, energizing rather than depleting. You know you're acting from alignment when the action itself feels good, when movement creates momentum rather than resistance, when effort feels like flow rather than struggle. I want to tell you about Carlos because his transformation perfectly illustrates this principle. Carlos was a real estate agent who worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week. He prospected constantly, chased every lead, attended every networking event, said yes to every potential client. He was the definition of massive action, and he was barely surviving financially. Carlos couldn't understand why all his effort wasn't translating into results. He worked harder than anyone he knew, but agents who worked half as much were earning twice as much. When we examined Carlos's actions, the problem became obvious. Every action came from fear. He prospected from desperation to find clients. He chased leads from anxiety about his pipeline. He attended events from worry that he'd miss opportunities. He said yes to everyone from fear of turning away potential income. His actions were constant, but they were all contaminated by the frequency of lack. And that frequency was repelling the very results he was working so hard to create. We didn't reduce Carlos's activity. We transformed the consciousness behind his activity. Before making any business move, Carlos learned to check his internal state. If he felt anxious, desperate, or fearful, he would pause, shift his frequency to peace and confidence, and only then take action. If he felt inspired, excited, and aligned, he would move immediately and decisively. This simple shift, acting from alignment rather than anxiety, changed everything. Within 2 months, Carlos's income doubled. Within 6 months, it had tripled. He was working fewer hours, attending fewer events, saying no to clients who weren't aligned. But every action he took was infused with the frequency of confidence and abundance, and that frequency was magnetic. The right clients appeared. Perfect opportunities materialized. Deals closed effortlessly, not because he worked harder, but because he worked from alignment. This is what aligned action looks like. It's not about doing less or being passive. It's about doing what matters from a state of consciousness that supports manifestation rather than sabotages it. It's about distinguishing between inspired action and desperate action, between wisdom-guided movement and fear-driven hustle. Solomon took bold, decisive action throughout his life, but every move was aligned with wisdom. Every decision flowed from elevated consciousness. Every step was taken from certainty rather than anxiety. The second principle of aligned action is divine timing. There's a season for planting and a season for harvesting, a time to act and a time to wait, a moment when movement creates momentum, and a moment when patience allows alignment to complete. Most people's problem isn't that they don't take enough action. It's that they take the wrong action at the wrong time, from the wrong state of consciousness. They force movement when they should be cultivating inner alignment. They wait passively when they should be taking inspired action. They've lost touch with the natural rhythm that governs all manifestation. Solomon understood timing with exquisite precision. He didn't rush to build the temple. He waited until every resource was aligned, every condition was right, every element was prepared. When he finally moved, construction proceeded smoothly because the timing was perfect. He didn't force opportunities before they were ripe. He didn't delay action when the moment was right. He had developed the sensitivity to feel when alignment was complete and when movement would flow rather than force. This sensitivity comes from quieting your mind enough to hear intuition, trusting your inner guidance more than external pressure, and being willing to wait for true alignment even when circumstances suggest urgency. Your intuition knows divine timing. Your body knows when movement will flow and when it will force. But you can only access this knowing when you're not overwhelmed by anxiety, driven by desperation, or controlled by the false urgency that fear creates. Practice this starting tonight. Before taking any action toward your financial goals, pause and check your internal state. Ask yourself, am I about to act from fear or from faith? From desperation or from inspiration? From force or from flow? If you're acting from fear, stop. Shift your state first. Get back into alignment. Generate the emotions of abundance. Connect with your certainty. And only then, from that elevated state, take action. You'll be amazed how much more effective your actions become when they're aligned with the consciousness you're cultivating. The third principle of aligned action is that it must express your authentic nature rather than imitate someone else's success formula. Solomon didn't try to rule like his father David. He didn't attempt to replicate other kings' strategies. He acted from his own unique wisdom, expressed his own particular gifts, and created wealth in ways that were authentic to who he was. This authenticity was magnetic because it was real, unforced, genuinely aligned with his essence. You cannot create lasting wealth by mimicking someone else's path. You can learn from others, study their principles, understand their strategies, but your actual actions must flow from your own authentic expression. When you try to force yourself into someone else's formula, you create internal resistance. Part of you knows this isn't really you, and that resistance undermines your manifestation. But when you act from authentic alignment with who you truly are, everything flows because there's no internal conflict, no self-betrayal, no pretending to be someone you're not. I worked with a woman named Lisa who was trying to build wealth through aggressive stock trading because that's what her successful brother-in-law did. Lisa forced herself to learn complex trading strategies, spent hours analyzing markets, and took trades that terrified her. She was constantly stressed, rarely profitable, and deeply unhappy. When I asked her what she actually enjoyed, what naturally excited her, she lit up talking about interior design, but she'd dismissed that passion as not a real business and tried to force herself into trading because that's where she thought money was. We shifted Lisa's entire approach. She stopped trying to be a trader and started building a design business aligned with her authentic gifts. The actions required were completely different: consulting with clients, creating mood boards, sourcing materials, staging properties. But these actions flowed naturally from who she actually was. They energized her instead of depleting her. They felt like expression instead of effort. And within a year, her design business was generating more income than she'd ever made forcing herself to trade stocks. This is the power of authentic action. When you're doing what genuinely aligns with your nature, you're not fighting yourself. All your energy flows in one direction. There's no internal resistance bleeding away your power. You become magnetic because you're being real, and authenticity has a frequency that attracts opportunities, clients, and resources in ways that imitation never can. The fourth principle of aligned action is that it must integrate both masculine and feminine energy. Masculine energy is action, doing, pushing, making things happen. Feminine energy is receptivity, allowing, being, letting things come to you. Most people, especially in Western culture, are heavily imbalanced toward masculine energy. They believe that if they're not constantly doing, pushing, and forcing, nothing will happen. But this creates exhaustion, resistance, and burnout. True wealth flows from the integration of both energies, knowing when to act and when to receive, when to push and when to allow, when to make things happen and when to let things unfold. Solomon integrated both energies masterfully. He took decisive action when action was called for, building projects, making judgments, establishing systems. But he also practiced deep receptivity, listening to wisdom, allowing insight to emerge, letting opportunities come to him. He didn't believe he had to force every outcome through effort alone. He trusted that aligned action combined with receptive allowing would create results that purely masculine force never could. This integration is especially important in manifestation. You take inspired action toward your goals. That's masculine energy. But you also remain open to unexpected opportunities, synchronicities, and manifestations that arrive in ways you didn't anticipate. That's feminine energy. You work toward your vision while simultaneously being receptive to the universe working on your behalf in ways that exceed your planning. This balanced approach creates effortless prosperity because you're not trying to control everything through force, but you're also not being completely passive, hoping things will magically appear. Practice this integration. After you take action toward your financial goals, consciously shift into receptive mode. Release attachment to specific outcomes. Open yourself to possibilities you haven't imagined. Trust that the universe is responding to your frequency and your efforts with opportunities, resources, and manifestations that may arrive in unexpected ways. This receptivity is not passivity. It's got active trust, conscious allowing, deliberate openness to abundance flowing through channels you might not have anticipated. The fifth principle of aligned action is consistency from elevated consciousness. One aligned action is powerful. Consistent aligned action is unstoppable. Solomon didn't have one moment of wisdom and spend the rest of his life coasting on that insight. He consistently aligned his consciousness with wisdom and took regular action from that state. Day after day, decision after decision, action after action, all aligned, all elevated, all flowing from the same high-frequency consciousness. This consistency created momentum that nothing could stop. Most people take sporadic action from inconsistent states. They act from inspiration on Monday, desperation on Tuesday, confidence on Wednesday, fear on Thursday. Their actions contradict each other because their consciousness keeps shifting. This creates chaotic results because the universe is receiving contradictory signals. Aligned action requires consistent consciousness, and consistent consciousness creates consistent results that compound over time into extraordinary manifestation. Here's what consistency looks like in practice. You develop a daily practice of elevating your consciousness. Meditation, visualization, emotional alchemy, whatever works for you. You don't skip this practice on busy days or when you don't feel like it. You maintain this consistent elevation of consciousness, and from that consistently elevated state, you take whatever actions your day requires. Your actions might vary, but the consciousness behind them remains constant. That's what creates the momentum that builds lasting wealth. Solomon's daily practice was connection with wisdom. Before every decision, before every action, he aligned himself with divine intelligence. This wasn't occasional. This was his consistent way of being. And because his consciousness remained consistently elevated, his actions remained consistently effective. He didn't have amazing days followed by terrible days. He had consistent forward movement because his consciousness provided consistent alignment for his actions. The sixth principle of aligned action is that it must include strategic rest. Action without rest leads to burnout. Rest without action leads to stagnation. But strategic rest, integrated with inspired action, creates a sustainable rhythm that allows manifestation to complete. You plant seeds through action, but the seeds need time in the darkness of rest to germinate. You can't dig up seeds every day to check if they're growing. You must trust the process, take aligned action, and then rest in the certainty that growth is happening beneath the surface. Solomon understood the power of rest. He didn't work constantly. He built in times of stillness, celebration, and rejuvenation. These weren't wasted time. They were essential parts of the manifestation cycle. Rest allows your nervous system to integrate elevated states. It gives the universe time to arrange circumstances in response to your frequency. It creates space for inspiration, insight, and guidance to emerge. Without strategic rest, you're constantly in doing mode, never allowing the being mode that magnetizes manifestation. Practice this wisdom. After periods of inspired action, consciously rest. Not collapse from exhaustion, but deliberate rest from a place of trust and completion. Know that you've done your part. Trust that the universe is doing its part. Rest in the certainty that everything is unfolding perfectly. This rest isn't laziness. It's strategic trust. It's the feminine allowing that complements masculine action. It's the space that allows manifestation to complete. As you absorb these principles tonight, recognize that your relationship with action is transforming. You're releasing the exhausting pattern of desperate doing and embracing the wisdom of aligned action. You're learning to feel the difference between force and flow, between anxiety-driven hustle and inspiration-guided movement. You're developing sensitivity to divine timing, authenticity in expression, integration of masculine and feminine energy, consistency from elevated consciousness, and strategic rest that allows manifestation to complete. Solomon's wealth wasn't created by working harder than everyone else. It was created by working from a consciousness that turned every action into a wealth-generating force. His movements were aligned. His timing was perfect. His expressions were authentic. His energy was integrated. His consistency was unshakable. His rest was strategic. And all of this flowed from the wisdom that knew how to bridge consciousness and creation through right action at the right time from the right state of being. You have access to this same wisdom. You can feel when action is aligned and when it's forced. You can sense divine timing when you're not overwhelmed by false urgency. You can express your authentic nature when you stop imitating others' formulas. You can integrate masculine and feminine energies when you trust both action and receptivity. You can maintain consistency when your daily practice keeps you elevated. You can rest strategically when you trust the manifestation process. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, feel yourself releasing the need to force outcomes through anxious action. Feel yourself opening to the wisdom of aligned movement. Feel yourself trusting that one inspired step from elevated consciousness creates more wealth than 1,000 desperate efforts from fear. Feel yourself becoming someone who acts from alignment, moves with divine timing, expresses authentic nature, integrates energies, maintains consistency, and rests strategically. This is Solomon's wisdom. This is the transformation already happening in how you move through the world and create wealth through aligned action. Chapter 7. Building Your Temple of Consciousness. Solomon's most famous achievement was building the temple, a magnificent structure that took years to complete, required the finest materials from around the known world, and employed the most skilled craftsmen of his time. But the physical temple was only the outer manifestation of something far more important. The temple of consciousness Solomon had already built within himself. The external structure reflected an internal architecture, a carefully constructed mental and emotional environment where wisdom could dwell, where abundance could flourish, where divine intelligence could express itself without obstruction. Before Solomon built anything in the physical world, he built the consciousness capable of manifesting such magnificence. You must do the same. Before lasting wealth can manifest in your external reality, you must build an internal temple worthy of housing unlimited abundance. Your consciousness must become a sacred space, organized, purified, fortified, and dedicated to prosperity. Right now, most people's consciousness is more like a cluttered warehouse than a temple. Thoughts are scattered everywhere. Emotions are unmanaged. Beliefs contradict each other, and old programming creates constant interference. You cannot generate lasting wealth from chaos. You must build order, structure, beauty, and coherence within your own consciousness first. The temple Solomon built had specific characteristics that we can apply to building your internal temple of consciousness. The first characteristic was a solid foundation. Solomon didn't build on sand or unstable ground. He chose bedrock, cleared it completely, and established foundations that could support the massive structure he intended to create. Your consciousness requires the same kind of foundation, unshakable truths that can support unlimited abundance without cracking under pressure or shifting when circumstances challenge you. What is the bedrock foundation of prosperity consciousness? It's the recognition that you are not separate from the source of all abundance. You are not a disconnected individual trying to extract resources from a limited supply. You are a focal point of infinite consciousness, an individualized expression of the same intelligence that creates galaxies, grows forests from seeds, and orchestrates the perfect complexity of your body without your conscious effort. This is not philosophy or belief. This is the fundamental truth of what you are. And when this truth becomes your foundation, nothing can shake your prosperity because you're building on reality itself, rather than on the shifting sands of circumstance and opinion. Most people build their financial consciousness on unstable foundations, their job security, their current income, what their parents taught them about money, what society says is possible for someone like them. These foundations shift and crack because they're based on external conditions and inherited beliefs, rather than on fundamental truth. When you build on the foundation that you are infinite consciousness having a temporary human experience, that abundance is your natural state, that the universe is inherently supportive rather than hostile, you've established bedrock that no circumstance can shake. Let me tell you about Margaret, because her story illustrates the importance of foundation perfectly. Margaret had built an impressive career in finance, earning a substantial income, living in a beautiful home, appearing successful by every external measure. But her entire financial consciousness was built on the unstable foundation of her job. Her sense of security, her identity, her peace of mind, all dependent on her employment continuing. When the company restructured and eliminated her position, Margaret's entire consciousness collapsed. Not just her income, her sense of self, her confidence, her belief in her ability to create wealth. The foundation wasn't solid, so when circumstances shifted, everything crumbled. We rebuilt Margaret's consciousness from the ground up, starting with a new foundation. Instead of basing her security on external circumstances, we established the truth that she was creative consciousness itself, capable of generating value and attracting resources regardless of any particular job or circumstance. This foundation didn't depend on any company, any economy, any external condition. It was based on what she truly was, infinite potential focused into human form. From that foundation, Margaret rebuilt her financial reality, but this time it was unshakable because it was built on truth rather than on circumstances. The second characteristic of Solomon's temple was that it was cleared of everything that didn't belong. Before construction began, the site was completely purified. No debris, no old structures, no contamination. Your consciousness requires the same clearing. You must identify and remove everything that doesn't support prosperity, every limiting belief, every fear-based pattern, every inherited program that says you can't, shouldn't, or won't ever have wealth. This clearing is not optional. You cannot build a temple of abundance on ground contaminated with scarcity consciousness. This clearing process requires brutal honesty about what's actually present in your consciousness. Most people deny or minimize their limiting beliefs because acknowledging them feels uncomfortable. But you cannot clear what you won't see. You must be willing to look directly at the beliefs running in your subconscious. Beliefs about money, about yourself, about what's possible for you, about what wealthy people are like, about whether you deserve abundance. Many of these beliefs will be ugly, irrational, and painful to acknowledge. Clear them anyway. They're contaminating the ground where you're trying to build prosperity. The clearing process works like this. Identify a limiting belief. Acknowledge it without judgment. Recognize that it's just a program you absorbed, rather than truth, and consciously choose to release it. Don't fight the belief or try to force yourself to believe the opposite. Simply recognize it as old programming that no longer serves you, thank it for trying to protect you, and release it. Then install a new belief that actually supports prosperity. This is conscious reprogramming, clearing the old, installing the new, building clean ground for your temple of abundance. I worked with a man named Thomas who discovered a deeply buried belief that wealth would make him lose his authenticity. Thomas prided himself on being genuine and real, and somewhere in his subconscious, he'd formed the association that wealthy people were fake, pretentious, and disconnected from what really mattered. This belief was invisible to him consciously, but it was actively preventing wealth from manifesting because his subconscious saw prosperity as a threat to his identity. Once we brought this belief into the light, acknowledged it, and cleared it, Thomas could see that wealth and authenticity weren't opposites, that he could be genuinely wealthy, that prosperity would actually amplify his ability to be authentic rather than diminish it. The clearing of that one belief opened channels for abundance that had been blocked for decades. The third characteristic of Solomon's temple was exquisite design. Every detail was intentional. Nothing was random or haphazard. The structure, the materials, the decorations, the layout, everything served a purpose and contributed to the whole. Your consciousness requires the same intentional design. You cannot just throw random positive thoughts at your mind and hope they create wealth. You must design your mental and emotional environment with the same care Solomon designed his temple. Intentional design means choosing what thoughts you allow to dominate your consciousness. It means curating your beliefs the way an artist curates a gallery. It means organizing your mental environment so that prosperity-supporting thoughts are prominent, easily accessible, and constantly reinforced, while scarcity thoughts are minimized, isolated, and eventually eliminated. This is conscious architecture. You're designing the internal environment where abundance will live. Think about the design of your current mental environment. When you think about money, what's the dominant atmosphere? Is it anxious, stressful, worried? Or is it peaceful, confident, excited? When you imagine your financial future, what's the aesthetic? Is it constrained, limited, difficult? Or is it expansive, unlimited, flowing? Your mental environment has a design right now, whether you created it intentionally or not. The question is, does that design support the wealth you desire, or does it block it? Solomon designed his temple to reflect and honor divine presence. You must design your consciousness to reflect and honor your true nature as abundant, creative, unlimited potential. This means surrounding yourself mentally with images, thoughts, and feelings that reinforce prosperity rather than scarcity. It means creating an internal atmosphere of trust rather than fear, possibility rather than limitation, abundance rather than lack. This is not denial of current circumstances. This is intentional creation of the consciousness that will generate new circumstances. The fourth characteristic of Solomon's temple was quality materials. He didn't build with whatever was cheap or convenient. He sourced cedar from Lebanon, gold from Ophir, the finest bronze, the most precious stones. Nothing but the highest quality was acceptable for this sacred structure. Your consciousness deserves the same standard. You cannot feed your mind junk, negative news, fearful conversations, scarcity-based entertainment, complaints and criticism, and expect to build a temple of abundance. The quality of what you allow into your consciousness determines the quality of what you can build. This principle requires fierce boundaries around what you consume mentally and emotionally. What are you reading? What are you watching? What conversations are you participating in? What social media are you absorbing? What music are you listening to? What are you allowing your eyes, ears, and attention to take in? All of this is material you're using to build your consciousness. If the material is low quality, negative, fearful, scarcity-based, toxic, your consciousness will reflect that. If the material is high quality, uplifting, empowering, abundance-oriented, truthful, your consciousness will reflect that instead. I need to tell you about Rachel because she initially resisted this principle completely. Rachel insisted that she needed to stay informed about world events, that ignoring negative news was irresponsible, that she couldn't just avoid reality. But Rachel was also perpetually stressed, constantly worried about money, and unable to break through to the prosperity she desired. When she finally agreed to a 30-day experiment of consuming only high-quality mental material, uplifting books, inspiring content, empowering conversations, her entire consciousness shifted. She discovered that she hadn't been staying informed. She'd been contaminating her consciousness with low-quality material that was actively preventing wealth from manifesting. The shift in what she consumed created a shift in what she could build internally, which created a shift in what manifested externally. The fifth characteristic of Solomon's temple was that it had specific chambers for specific purposes. There was a place for worship, a place for offerings, a place for the Holy of Holies. Everything had its proper place, and that organization created power. Your consciousness requires the same kind of organized chambers. You need a mental space for vision where you hold your financial goals clearly. You need an emotional space for gratitude, where you practice appreciation. You need a consciousness chamber for releasing, where you let go of what no longer serves you. You need a sacred space for connection, where you align with infinite intelligence. Organization creates power because it prevents confusion and allows each aspect of consciousness to serve its purpose without interference. Most people's consciousness is completely disorganized. Worries about bills mix with dreams of abundance. Fear about the future coexists with faith in divine provision. Resentment of wealthy people sits next to desire for wealth. This disorganization creates internal conflict, mixed signals to the quantum field, and contradictory results. When you organize your consciousness into clear chambers, you can access each state intentionally, rather than being pulled randomly between contradictory frequencies. Practice creating these chambers now. Imagine a mental space dedicated entirely to your vision of prosperity. See it, feel it, make it vivid and real. This is your vision chamber, and whenever you enter it mentally, you're surrounded by the reality you're creating. Imagine another space dedicated to gratitude, a chamber where you feel deep appreciation for what you already have and what's manifesting. This is your gratitude chamber, and entering it shifts your frequency immediately. Create a releasing chamber where you consciously let go of limiting beliefs, old patterns, fear, and doubt. Create a connection chamber where you feel your oneness with infinite intelligence and abundant supply. These organized chambers give you access to specific states whenever you need them. The sixth characteristic of Solomon's temple was that it was maintained. He didn't build it and abandon it. The temple required constant care, regular attention, ongoing purification, and consecration. Your consciousness temple requires the same maintenance. You cannot build prosperity consciousness once and then neglect it. You must maintain it daily through practices that keep your consciousness clear, elevated, and aligned with abundance. Daily maintenance looks like this. You begin each day by entering your consciousness temple through meditation or visualization. You clear any mental debris that accumulated overnight, worry thoughts, fear patterns, doubts that crept in. You strengthen your foundation by reconnecting with fundamental truths about your nature and the nature of abundance. You check the quality of materials by being conscious of what you're consuming. You organize your chambers by intentionally accessing vision, gratitude, release, and connection. You maintain the structure by catching limiting thoughts when they arise and replacing them with prosperity-supporting beliefs. This maintenance isn't burdensome when you understand its purpose. You're not maintaining consciousness to accomplish some distant goal. You're maintaining it because the consciousness itself is the goal. When your internal temple is clear, beautiful, organized, and well-maintained, your external reality must reflect that. The wealth you desire isn't something separate that you're trying to attract. It's the natural expression of a consciousness that has become a worthy vessel for abundance. The seventh characteristic of Solomon's temple was that it was dedicated to something greater than himself. It wasn't built for his ego or to prove his greatness. It was built to honor divine wisdom, to create a space where the infinite could express through the finite, where the sacred could manifest in physical form. Your consciousness temple must have the same quality of dedication. Your prosperity isn't ultimately about you accumulating more stuff. It's about you becoming a clear channel through which abundance flows not just to you, but through you, to benefit others, serve the world, and express the infinite creativity that you truly are. This dedication transforms everything. When wealth is purely self-focused, it creates anxiety about losing, fear that it won't be enough, constant comparison with others, and ultimate emptiness no matter how much accumulates. But when wealth flows through you as an expression of your purpose, as a resource for contribution, as a means of serving something greater than ego, it brings genuine fulfillment. More importantly, this dedication removes the desperation that blocks manifestation. You're not desperately grasping at wealth to fill an inner void. You're building consciousness to serve as a clear channel for abundance that benefits all. Solomon's wealth served his wisdom. It enabled him to build the temple, support his people, create beauty, advance understanding, and leave a legacy that still inspires thousands of years later. Your wealth must serve something beyond your personal comfort. What is your temple being built to honor? What greater purpose will your abundance serve? When you answer these questions clearly, your consciousness gains a dimension of meaning that exponentially increases its power to manifest. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, visualize your internal temple. See its solid foundation built on truth rather than circumstance. See it cleared of all contamination, purified of limiting beliefs. See its exquisite design, every element intentional and beautiful. See it built from the highest quality materials, thoughts, feelings, and beliefs worthy of prosperity consciousness. See its organized chambers, each serving its specific purpose. See it well-maintained, clear, and shining. See it dedicated to something greater than ego, serving divine expression through your unique gifts. So this temple exists now in consciousness, and from this consciousness, your external wealth must manifest. You are building something magnificent, not just a bank account, not just a business, not just financial security. You're building a consciousness worthy of unlimited abundance. You're constructing an internal environment where prosperity can dwell permanently rather than visiting temporarily. You're creating a temple that honors your true nature as infinite creative potential focused into human form for the purpose of demonstrating that heaven and earth, spirit and matter, Consciousness and creation are not separate, but one. This is Solomon's true legacy. Not the golden grandeur, but the consciousness that made them inevitable. And this consciousness is now being built within you. Chapter 8. The Circle of Wise Counsel. Solomon's wisdom is legendary, but here's what most people miss. Solomon didn't develop that wisdom in isolation. He surrounded himself with wise counselors, skilled advisors, and people who elevated rather than diminished his consciousness. The famous verse says, "In the multitude of counselors there is safety." But it's not just any multitude. It's the right multitude. Solomon understood something that will either accelerate or destroy your financial transformation. You cannot rise above the frequency of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Your consciousness will always gravitate toward the average of your constant associations. This is not opinion. This is how your brain works, how mirror neurons function, how electromagnetic fields interact. You are literally being programmed by your environment every single moment. And unless you consciously curate that environment, you'll remain stuck at the frequency of whoever happens to be around you. Let me be completely direct about something that might be uncomfortable. If you're serious about wealth, you must audit your relationships with the same rigor Solomon used in selecting his counselors. Not everyone deserves access to your consciousness. Not every voice should have influence over your thinking. Not every relationship serves your highest evolution. Some people in your life right now are actively sabotaging your prosperity, not because they're evil, but because their frequency is so locked into scarcity that they pull everyone around them down to that level. You can love them, you can have compassion for them, but you cannot allow them unlimited access to your consciousness if you're serious about transformation. This isn't about becoming arrogant or abandoning people. This is about recognizing that your consciousness is sacred territory, that what you're building requires protection, and that not everyone has earned the right to influence your mental and emotional environment. Solomon protected his consciousness fiercely. He welcomed wise counsel and dismissed foolish advice. He surrounded himself with people who expanded his thinking rather than contracted it. He understood that every conversation either elevates you or diminishes you. Every relationship either supports your vision or undermines it. Every person in your circle either reinforces prosperity, consciousness, or broadcasts scarcity that contaminates your frequency. Your brain has specialized neurons called mirror neurons that automatically mimic the emotions, thoughts, and behaviors of people around you. When you're with anxious people, your mirror neurons fire in patterns that create anxiety in you. When you're with abundant people, your mirror neurons fire in patterns that create abundance consciousness in you. This happens unconsciously, automatically, without your conscious awareness or permission. You literally become like the people you consistently spend time with, not because you want to, but because your neurobiology is designed to sync with your social environment. Beyond mirror neurons, there's the phenomenon of electromagnetic resonance. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field that extends several feet beyond your body. When you're physically near someone, your fields interact and influence each other. If you're trying to maintain a high-frequency state of prosperity consciousness, but you're constantly surrounded by people broadcasting low-frequency scarcity, your field is being pulled down constantly. You can maintain elevation for a while through conscious effort, but sustained elevation requires either moving away from low-frequency environments or building such a strong field that you influence others rather than being influenced by them. I need to tell you about Daniel because his story shows exactly how devastating the wrong associations can be and how powerful the right ones are. Daniel was working on his prosperity consciousness diligently. Daily meditation, visualization, affirmations, emotional practices, everything we've discussed. But he lived with 3 roommates who were perpetually broke, constantly complained about money, and spent every evening watching news that reinforced scarcity and fear. Daniel would elevate his consciousness in the morning, then spend 12 hours being pulled back down by the frequency of his environment. Daniel couldn't understand why his financial reality wasn't changing despite all his internal work. The problem wasn't his practice. The problem was his environment. His roommates weren't bad people, but their consciousness was contaminating his. Their constant complaints about money were installing scarcity programs. Their fearful conversations were lowering his frequency. Their cynical attitudes about wealth were undermining his belief in possibility. He was trying to build prosperity consciousness while living in a scarcity echo chamber, and the environment was winning. When Daniel finally moved out and found living arrangements with people who had growth mindsets and prosperity consciousness, everything shifted within weeks. Not because he changed his practices, but because he changed his environment. He was no longer fighting against constant contamination. His elevated states could stabilize because they weren't being pulled down 12 hours a day. His prosperity consciousness could take root because it was being reinforced rather than undermined by his daily association. Within 3 months, Daniel's income had doubled. Within 6 months, he'd started a successful business. The transformation wasn't about learning new information. It was about changing his circle. Solomon's counsel wasn't random. He specifically sought out the wisest people available. Architects from other nations, craftsmen with specialized skills, advisors who understood commerce, priests who understood spiritual principles, administrators who understood systems. Each person in his circle brought something valuable, expanded his thinking in some dimension, or elevated his consciousness in specific ways. His circle wasn't just people he liked, or people who made him comfortable. It was people who made him better, wiser, more capable of fulfilling his vision. You must curate your circle with the same intentionality. Who are the 5 people you spend the most time with? Are they operating from scarcity or abundance? Do they reinforce your vision or doubt it? Do they believe in possibility or limitation? Do they elevate your thinking or contract it? Do they celebrate your success or feel threatened by it? Do they support your transformation or try to keep you at your current level so they feel comfortable? Answer these questions honestly, without judgment but with clarity, because your financial future depends on the quality of your associations. The first principle of wise counsel is elevation. Every person in your inner circle should elevate your consciousness in some way. They don't have to be perfect or already at the destination you're pursuing, but they should be people who are genuinely growing, authentically committed to expansion, and operating from a fundamentally abundant rather than scarce worldview. Their presence should make you think bigger, feel more capable, believe more deeply in possibility. If someone consistently makes you feel small, doubtful, or limited, they don't belong in your inner circle, regardless of your history with them. This doesn't mean you only associate with positive people who never acknowledge challenges. Real elevation comes from people who see challenges clearly, but approach them from problem-solving consciousness, rather than victim consciousness. They don't deny difficulties. They face them with the confidence that solutions exist. They don't ignore obstacles. They figure out how to overcome or go around them. They're not in denial. They're in creative engagement with reality. These are the people who elevate you because they show you how to be realistic without being pessimistic, how to acknowledge what is while creating what could be. The second principle of wise counsel is specialization. Solomon didn't expect one person to be wise about everything. He had different advisors for different domains. You need the same strategic approach to your circle. You need people who understand money and finance. You need people who understand consciousness and transformation. You need people who understand your specific industry or field. You need people who understand relationship dynamics. You need people who understand health and energy. Different domains require different kinds of wisdom, and no single person has all of it. This means building a diverse circle, rather than surrounding yourself with people who all think exactly like you. Solomon brought in craftsmen from Tyre who had skills his own people didn't have. He learned from the Queen of Sheba's wisdom about administration and trade. He wasn't threatened by people who knew things he didn't. He was wise enough to learn from them. Your circle should include people who know what you don't know, who see what you can't see, who bring perspectives different from your own. This diversity creates a more complete picture of reality and gives you access to wisdom you couldn't generate alone. The third principle of wise counsel is reciprocity. This isn't about using people or extracting value from them. Wise counsel works best when it flows both ways, when you're adding value to your circle while receiving value from it. Solomon didn't just take from his advisors. He rewarded them generously, respected their expertise, implemented their wisdom, and created an environment where their gifts could flourish. You must approach your relationships with the same spirit of reciprocity. What value are you bringing? How are you supporting the growth of people who support yours? Healthy circles are based on mutual elevation, not one-sided extraction. This principle eliminates the gross feeling of networking, where people interact purely to get something from each other. Instead, you're building genuine relationships with people you respect, admire, and genuinely want to support. You're creating a circle where everyone benefits from everyone else's growth, where success is celebrated rather than envied, where wisdom is shared freely because abundance consciousness recognizes that helping others succeed doesn't diminish your own success. It amplifies it. I worked with a woman named Angela who initially resisted the idea of changing her friend group. These were people she'd known for 20 years, people she'd been through difficult times with, people she loved. But Angela was also honest enough to recognize that these friends were deeply invested in their shared story of struggle. They bonded over how hard life was, how unfair the system was, how impossible it was to get ahead. When Angela started talking about her prosperity goals, her friends responded with skepticism, mockery, and subtle sabotage disguised as concern. Angela felt torn between loyalty to her old friends and commitment to her transformation. We worked through this with compassion for everyone involved. Angela didn't abandon her old friends, but she did reduce the time and energy she invested in those relationships. She started cultivating new friendships with people who were on similar growth paths, people who understood what she was building, people who celebrated her wins rather than trying to pull her back down to comfortable mediocrity. This wasn't betrayal. This was self-protection. This wasn't arrogance. This was self-respect. Angela recognized that she had one life to live and unlimited potential to express, and spending that precious life surrounded by people committed to smallness was a misuse of her divine nature. The shift in Angela's circle created a shift in her reality. Within a year, her business had tripled in revenue. She'd attracted opportunities she never would have encountered in her old environment. She'd developed skills and confidence that her old circle would have mocked or minimized. And here's the beautiful part. As Angela elevated, some of her old friends got curious. Seeing her genuine transformation, witnessing her authentic prosperity, A few of them started asking how she did it. Angela became a source of elevation for them, but only after she'd protected her own consciousness enough to complete her transformation. You can't lift others until you've elevated yourself, and you can't elevate yourself if you're being constantly pulled down by your association. The fourth principle of wise counsel is that it must include mentorship from people ahead of where you are. Solomon learned from his father David, from advisors who had more experience, from international visitors who had achieved what he was building toward. You cannot learn to be wealthy from people who have never created wealth. You cannot develop prosperity consciousness from people who think and talk like broke people. You need access to people who have already gone where you're trying to go, who have already solved the problems you're facing, who have already embodied the consciousness you're building. This doesn't mean those people need to be your personal friend. Mentorship can come through books, courses, content, or formal program, but you need regular exposure to the thinking, feeling, and being of people who have successfully made the transformation you're pursuing. Their frequency needs to be part of your environment, so your mirror neurons can learn from them, so your consciousness can calibrate to their level, so your belief in what's possible can expand to match their reality. The fifth principle of wise counsel is protection from toxic influences. This is where boundaries become essential. Solomon had the authority to ban certain people from his presence, to refuse counsel from fools, to protect his consciousness from contamination. You may not have a kingdom, but you have full authority over your own consciousness, and you must exercise that authority with the same firmness Solomon did. This means saying no to conversations that reinforce scarcity. This means leaving situations where people are complaining, gossiping, or speaking about lack. This means turning off media that broadcasts fear and limitation. This means ending or limiting relationships that drain rather than energize. Many people resist this principle because they've been taught that boundaries are selfish or that they should be available to everyone who needs them. But here's the truth. You cannot serve from emptiness. You cannot elevate others while you're being pulled down. You cannot share prosperity consciousness if yours is being constantly contaminated. Your first responsibility is protecting and elevating your own consciousness. Once you're stable at a higher frequency, once you've built genuine prosperity, once you're operating from overflow rather than depletion, then you have something real to share with others. But if you sacrifice your transformation to maintain relationships with people committed to limitation, you help no one. You just stay stuck together. The sixth principle of wise counsel is intentional distance from collective consciousness. This is subtle but crucial. There's a collective human consciousness that broadcasts specific frequencies about money, success, worthiness, and possibility. Much of this collective consciousness is based on fear, limitation, and scarcity. Most people are completely immersed in this collective frequency without realizing it. They watch the same news, absorb the same cultural messages, accept the same limiting beliefs as everyone around them, and wonder why they can't break through to different results. Solomon maintained a certain distance from collective thinking. He didn't adopt the limitations everyone else accepted. He didn't believe that wisdom and wealth were impossible for him just because they were rare for others. He created his own frequency independent of mass consciousness, and that independence allowed him to manifest what collective consciousness said was impossible. You must do the same. This means questioning beliefs that everyone seems to accept. This means not assuming that just because something is common, it's inevitable for you. This means developing your own relationship with truth, rather than accepting whatever your culture has decided is true. Creating distance from collective consciousness doesn't mean isolation or superiority. It means conscious selectivity about what you allow to influence your thinking. It means recognizing that most people's beliefs about money are based on inherited programming rather than direct investigation of how prosperity actually works. It means trusting your own experience and intuition more than you trust consensus opinion, especially when consensus opinion is demonstrably creating results you don't want. Tonight, as you absorb these truths, begin the process of evaluating and curating your circle. Who elevates you? Who diminishes you? Who reinforces prosperity consciousness? Who broadcasts scarcity? Who celebrates your growth? Who feels threatened by it? Be honest in your assessment, compassionate in your approach, but firm in your commitment to protecting your conscience. Solomon's wisdom was partly his own development, and partly the collective wisdom of everyone he surrounded himself with. Your prosperity will be the same, partly your internal work, and partly the frequency of your associations. Choose wisely. Your financial future depends on it more than almost anything else. You are building something rare and valuable, a consciousness capable of manifesting unlimited prosperity. That consciousness requires protection, cultivation, and the right environment to flourish. Surround yourself with wise counsel. Distance yourself from toxic influences. Create a circle that elevates rather than contracts, and watch as your reality transforms to match the elevated frequency of your carefully curated environment. This is Solomon's wisdom on association. This is your power to choose who influences your consciousness. This is the transformation that accelerates when you finally protect the sacred territory of your mind from contamination and surround it instead with wisdom, abundance, and genuine elevation. Chapter 9. Sustainable Wealth and Legacy. Thinking. Solomon's wealth didn't evaporate when he died. It lasted for generations. He built something that transcended his lifetime, created systems that sustained prosperity long after he was gone, and established a legacy that still speaks of abundance thousands of years later. This wasn't accident or luck. This was the natural result of thinking beyond immediate gratification, beyond personal accumulation, beyond the narrow time frame of a single lifetime. Solomon thought in terms of legacy, and legacy thinking creates a completely different quality of wealth than survival thinking or even success thinking. Legacy wealth is sustainable, generative, and self-perpetuating because it's built on principles rather than tactics, on systems rather than hustle, on consciousness that continues to create long after the initial effort stops. Most people never build real wealth because they're trapped in short-term thinking. They want quick results, immediate payoffs, instant manifestation. They chase opportunities that promise fast money. They make decisions based on what feels good right now, and they never build the deep foundations that create wealth that lasts. This short-term orientation comes from survival consciousness, the primitive brain that's focused only on getting through today, finding the next meal, avoiding immediate danger. But wealth isn't built by survival thinking. Wealth is built by people who can delay gratification, think in decades rather than days, and build systems that compound over time into extraordinary results. Solomon understood compound momentum. He recognized that small, consistent actions aligned with correct principles create results that multiply exponentially over time. He didn't try to build his temple in a year through frantic effort. He took 7 years, doing it right, establishing systems and structures that would last for generations. He didn't exhaust his resources pursuing every opportunity. He made strategic choices that created ongoing returns rather than one-time gains. He thought like an architect designing a building that would stand for centuries rather than like a gambler chasing the next big win. This is the shift you must make if you want wealth that lasts. From short-term wins to long-term building, from quick fixes to sustainable systems, from personal accumulation to legacy creation. The beautiful paradox is that when you think in terms of legacy, you often manifest abundance faster than when you're desperately chasing immediate results. Why? Because legacy thinking comes from abundance consciousness. You're so certain of unlimited supply that you can afford to build properly rather than grabbing desperately. That certainty broadcasts a frequency that magnetizes resources, opportunities, and support in ways that desperate short-term thinking never can. Let me tell you about Robert, because his transformation from short-term to legacy thinking changed everything about his financial reality. Robert was a serial entrepreneur who had started and abandoned 17 businesses in 12 years. Each time, he'd get excited about a new opportunity, pour all his energy into it for a few months, get frustrated when results didn't come immediately, and then jump to the next shiny opportunity. Robert had the intelligence, the work ethic, and the creativity to build real wealth. But he had no staying power, no commitment to seeing anything through to completion, no long-term vision beyond making enough money to feel temporarily secure. Robert came to me exhausted, broke, and confused about why nothing ever worked despite all his effort. The problem wasn't his ideas or his capabilities. The problem was his timeline. He was thinking in terms of months when he needed to be thinking in terms of years or decades. He was making decisions based on immediate emotional relief rather than long-term strategic value. He was building temporary structures rather than permanent foundation. His entire approach was optimized for short-term survival rather than long-term prosperity. We shifted Robert's entire orientation from success to legacy. Instead of asking, what opportunity can make me money quickly, he started asking, what can I build that will create value for decades? Instead of abandoning projects when they got difficult, he committed to seeing his current venture through to sustainable profitability before even considering anything else. Instead of chasing every new trend, he went deep into one area where he could develop genuine expertise and create lasting value. The shift from short-term to legacy thinking required patience Robert didn't naturally have, but it also created results Robert had never experienced. Within 3 years of committing to legacy thinking, Robert had built a business generating consistent 7-figure annual revenue. More importantly, he'd built systems that didn't require his constant presence, team members who could operate effectively without his direct supervision, and intellectual property that would continue creating value long after he stopped working directly in the business. For the first time in his entrepreneurial journey, Robert had created something sustainable rather than something that required his constant frantic energy to survive. The first principle of legacy thinking is building on principles rather than tactics. Tactics are temporary. What works in today's market might not work next year. Principles are eternal. They work regardless of circumstances, economic conditions, or changing trends. Solomon built his wealth on principles like wisdom, integrity, value creation, strategic relationships, and proper stewardship. These principles worked in his time, and they still work today, because they're based on fundamental truths about how prosperity actually operates, rather than on temporary market conditions or trendy strategy. When you build on principles, your wealth becomes anti-fragile. It doesn't just survive difficulty, it grows stronger through challenge. When you build on tactics, your wealth is fragile. As soon as circumstances shift, or the tactic stops working, everything collapses. This is why people who make money through gimmicks or shortcuts rarely keep it, while people who build wealth through sound principles create fortunes that last for generations. Principles compound, tactics expire. What are the principles you're building on? Are you creating value that genuinely serves people? Or are you just trying to extract money from them? Are you developing real skills and genuine expertise? Or are you hoping to get rich without becoming valuable? Are you building relationships based on mutual benefit and authentic connection? Or are you just networking to use people? Are you operating with integrity even when no one is watching? Or are you cutting corners whenever you think you can get away with it? Your answers to these questions determine whether you're building sustainable wealth or temporary success that will eventually collapse. The second principle of legacy thinking is creating systems rather than just working hard. Solomon didn't personally do all the work in his kingdom. He created systems, administrative structures, trade routes, judicial procedures, agricultural methods that allowed wealth to flow without requiring his direct involvement in every transaction. Systems create leverage. They allow you to generate results beyond what your personal effort could ever produce. They create wealth that continues flowing, even when you're sleeping, vacationing, or eventually no longer alive. Most people trade time for money. They work an hour. They get paid for an hour. This is not wealth building. This is survival. Wealth comes from creating systems that generate value independent of your time. This might be a business with employees and automated processes. This might be investments that generate passive income. This might be intellectual property that earns royalties. This might be trained team members who deliver your expertise without requiring your direct involvement. Whatever form it takes, systematic wealth creation is what separates people who work forever from people who build once and benefit continually. I worked with a consultant named Patricia who was making excellent income but had zero freedom. Every dollar she earned required her direct time and effort. If she stopped working, income stopped immediately. Patricia was successful by most measures, but she had built a high-paying job rather than real wealth. We transformed her business by systematizing what she did. She created training programs that taught her methodology to other consultants. She developed tools and templates that delivered value without requiring her time. She built a team that could serve clients using her systems without needing her direct involvement. The transformation took 2 years of building rather than just earning, of creating assets rather than just trading time. But at the end of that 2 years, Patricia had a business that generated revenue whether she showed up or not. She'd created systems that continued delivering value, serving clients, and producing income without consuming her time. She'd shifted from trading time for money to building wealth through systems, and that shift created freedom, scalability, and sustainability her previous approach could never achieve. The third principle of legacy thinking is contribution beyond personal benefit. This is where legacy becomes truly powerful. When your wealth serves only you, it has a limited frequency. When your wealth serves something greater than yourself, it taps into exponentially more creative power. Solomon's wealth wasn't just for his personal comfort. It built a temple that inspired millions, created beauty that elevated consciousness, supported his people's well-being, and advanced human understanding of wisdom and divine principle. That larger purpose gave his wealth meaning and made it magnetic to even greater resources and opportunities. What is your wealth for? If the answer is purely personal consumption, bigger house, nicer car, more expensive vacations, you're building from a limited frequency that will plateau quickly. But if your wealth serves a purpose beyond yourself, supporting your family for generations, funding causes you believe in, creating jobs and opportunities for others, solving problems that matter, leaving the world better than you found it, you're building from a frequency that has access to unlimited resources because you're aligning with the creative impulse of the universe itself. This doesn't mean you can't enjoy your wealth personally. Solomon lived in luxury, enjoyed the finest things, and celebrated abundance. But his personal enjoyment was the byproduct of building something meaningful, rather than the entire purpose. When personal pleasure is the goal, it's never enough. When contribution is the purpose and personal enjoyment is the byproduct, both become deeply satisfying and sustainable. The fourth principle of legacy thinking is making decisions for your future self, rather than just your present self. Every choice you make is either setting up your future self for success or creating problems for them to deal with. Short-term thinking makes choices that feel good now but create pain later. Spending money you haven't earned, avoiding difficult conversations, taking shortcuts that will eventually require costly corrections. Legacy thinking makes choices that might be uncomfortable now, but create ease and abundance later. Investing in skill development, having difficult conversations early, doing things right even when it takes longer. Solomon made countless decisions that cost him in the short term, but paid enormous dividends long term. He spent years building the temple when he could have built it faster with lower quality. He invested in developing wisdom when he could have just relied on instinct. He established systems and structures when it would have been easier to rule through direct command. Every decision was made with the future in mind, and that orientation created wealth that lasted far beyond his lifetime. Your future self is watching the decisions you make today. Are you making choices that will make them grateful or regretful? Are you building assets or just consuming income? Are you developing skills that appreciate or indulging in pleasures that depreciate? Are you creating systems that will serve you for decades or just solving immediate problems? The quality of your future life is being determined by the quality of your current decisions, and legacy thinking means weighing every choice against its long-term impact, rather than just its immediate gratification. The fifth principle of legacy thinking is compound momentum. This is perhaps the most powerful wealth-building force in existence, yet most people never tap into it because they lack the patience and consistency required. Compound momentum means small, consistent actions in the right direction create results that multiply exponentially over time. The first year might show modest results. The second year builds on the first. The third year accelerates because you're building on 2 years of foundation. By year 5 or 10, you're experiencing results that seem miraculous to people who don't understand how compounding works, but are actually the predictable outcome of sustained, consistent, aligned effort over time. Solomon understood compounding in every dimension. His wisdom compounded as each insight built on previous understanding. His wealth compounded as profitable ventures generated resources for more ventures. His influence compounded as successful outcomes created reputation that attracted more opportunities. His legacy compounded as the systems he built continued creating value generation after generation. Nothing about Solomon's success was instant. Everything about it was compound, built gradually, sustained consistently, multiplied exponentially over time. You must embrace the same patience with your wealth building. Stop looking for the one big breakthrough that will change everything instantly. Start building consistent momentum that compounds into extraordinary results over time. Invest 10% of your income every month for 20 years and watch compound interest create wealth that looks like magic, but is actually just mathematics, applied, consistent. Develop your skills incrementally over a decade and watch yourself become an expert whose value commands premium compensation. Build genuine relationships year after year and watch your network become a source of endless opportunity. Create valuable content consistently and watch compound attention. Create an audience that generates wealth in ways you never imagined. Compounding requires 3 things: consistency over time, resisting the temptation to start over when progress feels slow, and protecting the momentum you've built from anything that would interrupt the compounding process. Most people fail at compounding because they lack one of these 3. They're inconsistent, so they never build real momentum. They restart constantly, so compound growth never has time to accelerate. Or they interrupt progress by making impulsive decisions that destroy the momentum they've built. Legacy thinkers protect their compound momentum as fiercely as Solomon protected his temple. The 6th principle of legacy thinking is teaching what you learn and raising others to your level. Legacy isn't just about what you build for yourself. It's about what you pass on to others. Solomon didn't hoard his wisdom. He shared it through proverbs, through teaching, through the systems he established that continued educating people long after his death. Your legacy is ultimately measured not by what you accumulate, but by what you transmit, the wisdom you share, the people you develop, the consciousness you help others embody. This principle transforms your wealth journey from personal achievement to collective elevation. As you learn how to create prosperity, teach it to others. As you develop systems that work, share them with people who can benefit. As you embody abundance consciousness, help others shift their frequency. This isn't just altruism. This is how your own wealth becomes truly sustainable. When you've raised others to your level, you've created a community that reinforces your consciousness rather than pulling it down. You've multiplied the impact of your wisdom far beyond what you could create alone. You've established a legacy that continues growing long after you're gone. I need to tell you about Helen because she embodies this principle beautifully. Helen built significant wealth through real estate investment, but her real legacy wasn't the properties she owned. It was the dozens of people she mentored in building their own wealth through real estate. Helen didn't see other investors as competition. She saw them as people she could elevate, and in elevating them, she elevated the entire field. Her mentees became successful investors who credited Helen for their start. Some of them began mentoring others, multiplying Helen's impact exponentially. Helen's legacy wasn't just measured in dollars. It was measured in transformed lives, in generational wealth created by people she'd taught, in consciousness shifts that rippled out far beyond her direct reach. This is legacy thinking at its finest, building something that transcends your individual success, creating value that continues multiplying long after your direct involvement ends, establishing consciousness patterns that spread through culture like ripples across a pond. Solomon's wisdom is still transforming lives thousands of years after his death, because he built legacy rather than just success. Your prosperity can do the same, not on the scale of a biblical king, perhaps, but certainly on the scale of your family, your community, your sphere of influence. Tonight, as you absorb these truths, shift your entire orientation from short-term gains to long-term legacy. Feel yourself releasing the desperate need for immediate results and embracing the patient confidence of someone building for decades. Feel yourself choosing principles over tactics, systems over hustle, contribution over consumption, future benefit over present gratification, compound momentum over instant breakthrough, transmission to others over hoarding for yourself. This is legacy thinking, the consciousness that builds wealth that lasts, prosperity that serves, abundance that continues creating value far beyond a single lifetime. This is Solomon's wisdom. This is your transformation from temporary success to permanent legacy. This is the shift that makes everything you've learned sustainable rather than fleeting, generative rather than stagnant, eternal rather than temporary. Chapter 10. Becoming the living embodiment. There comes a moment in every true transformation when you stop practicing prosperity consciousness and simply become it, when abundance is no longer something you're trying to create, but something you naturally are. When wealth consciousness isn't a state you access through techniques, but your default way of being. This is the ultimate integration, the final evolution, the shift from doing to being that Solomon mastered completely. He didn't practice wisdom, he was wisdom. He didn't work at being prosperous. He embodied prosperity so completely that it flowed through him as naturally as breath. This is your destination, not someday in the distant future, but now, as the culmination of everything you've learned, practiced, and integrated throughout this journey. Solomon's consciousness wasn't compartmentalized. He didn't have a prosperity mindset that he put on for business and took off for other areas of life. His entire being was saturated with wisdom and abundance. It informed how he made decisions, how he related to people, how he approached challenges, how he celebrated victories, how he planned for the future, how he learned from the past. Every dimension of his existence reflected the consciousness he'd cultivated until there was no separation between Solomon the person and Solomon, the embodiment of wisdom and wealth. This complete integration is what made his prosperity effortless and his legacy eternal. You're ready for this same integration. Everything you've absorbed over these 10 chapters has been preparing you for this moment, the moment when all the separate pieces come together into a unified whole, when conscious effort transforms into natural expression, when the person you've been becoming finally becomes who you simply are. This isn't about perfection or never having another limiting thought. This is about your baseline consciousness shifting so completely that prosperity becomes your default frequency, your natural state, your automatic way of being in the world. Let me be clear about what embodiment means, because many people misunderstand this crucial concept. Embodiment doesn't mean your circumstances are always perfect, or you never faced challenge. Solomon faced enormous challenges running a kingdom, conflicts, difficult decisions, complex situations with no easy answers. Embodiment means you meet whatever arises from a consciousness of abundance rather than scarcity, wisdom rather than fear, trust rather than anxiety. It means your internal state isn't determined by external circumstances, but by the consciousness you've become. You are prosperity, regardless of what your bank account says today. You are abundance, regardless of what challenges you're currently facing. You are wealth consciousness, regardless of what evidence has or hasn't manifested yet. This is the radical shift from conditional consciousness to unconditional being. Most people's prosperity consciousness is completely conditional. I'll feel abundant when I have money. I'll embody wealth when evidence appears. I'll trust when circumstances prove trustworthy. This conditional approach keeps manifestation always in the future, because you're waiting for external conditions before you'll become the internal consciousness that creates those conditions. Embodiment reverses this completely. You become prosperity consciousness now, regardless of conditions. You embody abundance before evidence appears. You are wealth before circumstances reflect it. And from that unconditional state of being, external reality has no choice but to reorganize itself to match your frequency. I need to tell you about Catherine, because her story shows exactly what embodiment looks like in practice. When Catherine came to me, she was spiritually advanced in many ways. She meditated daily, understood manifestation principles intellectually, and had done years of consciousness work. But she still struggled financially, and the contradiction between her spiritual understanding and her financial reality was becoming unbearable. Catherine could talk about abundance beautifully, but she couldn't embody it. The moment financial pressure appeared, she collapsed back into scarcity consciousness. The moment unexpected expenses arose, she panicked. The moment opportunities required investment, she froze with fear. We worked on moving Catherine from understanding to embodiment, from knowing about prosperity to being prosperity. The shift happened gradually as Catherine stopped trying to create the right state and started recognizing that she already was the consciousness she'd been seeking. She stopped practicing abundance techniques and started living as abundance itself. She stopped trying to feel wealthy and recognized that wealth was her nature, regardless of current bank balances. This wasn't denial of her circumstances. This was recognition of her essence beneath the circumstances. The transformation in Catherine's life was dramatic. Within 6 months, her income had increased by 300%. But more importantly, her relationship with money had completely transformed. She no longer panicked when expenses arose because she knew herself as connected to infinite supply. She no longer froze when opportunities appeared because she trusted her abundance to provide whatever resources were needed. She no longer collapsed into scarcity when circumstances challenged her because her consciousness wasn't dependent on circumstances anymore. Catherine had become prosperity conscious, and from that embodied state, wealth flowed naturally, effortlessly, inevitably. The first key to embodiment is recognizing that you already are what you've been seeking. You're not trying to become abundant. You're recognizing the abundance that's always been your true nature. You're not trying to create prosperity consciousness. You're removing the layers of conditioning that have hidden your natural prosperity. You're not trying to attract wealth. You're allowing the wealth that's your birthright to flow through you without the resistance of limiting beliefs and fearful patterns. This recognition changes everything because it shifts you from seeking to being, from becoming to recognizing, from creating to allowing. Solomon didn't try to become wise. He recognized wisdom as his essential nature and removed everything that obscured it. He didn't try to create wealth. He aligned with the abundance that was always flowing and removed the blocks that had been preventing its full expression. This is why his prosperity seemed so effortless. It wasn't something he was forcing into existence. It was something he was allowing to express through him by removing interference and aligning with truth. Practice this recognition right now. Stop trying to become abundant and recognize that abundance is already what you are beneath the layers of conditioning. Stop trying to create wealth and feel the wealth consciousness that's been present all along, just covered by learned scarcity. Stop trying to attract prosperity and open to the prosperity that's been waiting to flow through you the moment you stopped resisting it with limiting beliefs. You are not becoming something new. You are remembering something true. You are not creating something that doesn't exist. You are revealing what's always been present beneath the surface. The second key to embodiment is living from the end result rather than toward it. This is subtle but crucial. Most people live toward wealth. When I have money, then I'll feel secure. When I achieve success, then I'll be confident. When I manifest abundance, then I'll believe in possibility. This orientation keeps wealth always in the future, because you're living from lack toward fulfillment. Embodiment means living from the end result. You feel secure now, you're confident now, you believe in possibility now, and from that consciousness, wealth manifests as confirmation of what you already are, rather than as compensation for what you're lacking. Solomon lived from the end result in every dimension. He didn't pursue wisdom, hoping to eventually become wise. He claimed wisdom as his identity and lived from that consciousness, and his actions naturally reflected the wisdom he'd embodied. He didn't chase wealth hoping to eventually become prosperous. He embodied prosperity as his state of being, and his reality naturally organized itself to reflect that consciousness. This is the difference between working toward a goal from a place of lack and being the goal from a place of completion. The first exhausts you with endless striving. The second energizes you with natural expression. How do you live from the end result? You stop waiting for circumstances to change before you embody the consciousness you desire. You stop postponing the feeling of success until evidence appears. You start being now what you've been planning to become later. If wealth consciousness is your goal, you embody wealth consciousness today, regardless of your bank balance. If confident success is your destination, you become confident and successful in your being, now regardless of external results. If abundant generosity is your vision, you live with abundant generosity today, regardless of how much you currently have. This isn't pretending or denying reality. This is recognizing that consciousness creates reality, so embodying the consciousness now creates the reality later. You're not waiting for the reality to give you permission to embody the consciousness. You're embodying the consciousness that will create the reality. This is how manifestation actually works, but most people have it backwards. They wait for manifestation before embodiment, when embodiment must come first, for manifestation to follow. The third key to embodiment is integration across all dimensions of life. Embodied consciousness isn't compartmentalized. You can't be prosperity consciousness in business and scarcity consciousness in relationships. You can't be abundant with money and stingy with time. You can't be generous in one area and withholding in another. True embodiment means the consciousness saturates every dimension of your being. How you think about everything, how you feel about everyone, how you approach all situations. Solomon's wisdom informed his personal life, his business decisions, his spiritual practices, his relationships, his health, his entertainment. There was no separation between different areas because he'd integrated wisdom into his entire being. Begin integrating prosperity consciousness across your whole life if you're building abundance. Be abundant in all dimensions, generous with your time, lavish with your appreciation, expansive in your thinking about everything, not just money. If you're embodying wealth, be wealthy in how you treat your body, your relationships, your living space, your daily experience. If you're claiming prosperity, let that prosperity inform how you speak, how you listen, how you give, how you receive, how you celebrate, how you rest. When consciousness is truly embodied, it shows up everywhere, not just in the areas you're consciously working. The fourth key to embodiment is automatic response rather than conscious effort. In the beginning, you had to consciously choose empowering thoughts over limiting ones, deliberately generate elevated emotions, intentionally take aligned action. This conscious effort was necessary for building new neural pathways and establishing new patterns. But embodiment is when those choices become automatic, when the elevated state becomes your default, when aligned action flows naturally without requiring conscious decision. You don't have to remind yourself to breathe. Breathing happens automatically because it's integrated into your autonomic system. Embodied prosperity works the same way. Solomon didn't have to consciously choose wisdom in every situation. Wisdom was so integrated into his being that wise response was automatic. He didn't have to remind himself to think abundantly. Abundant thinking was his default mode. His consciousness had been programmed so thoroughly with prosperity that scarcity thoughts simply didn't arise anymore. Or when they did, they were recognized and released automatically without any struggle or effort. This is the freedom of embodiment. Prosperity consciousness becomes effortless because it's not something you're doing, it's something you are. You're moving toward this same automaticity. Every night you've spent with these teachings, every moment you've practiced elevated states, every time you've chosen empowering thoughts over limiting one, you've been programming new defaults into your consciousness. What once required intense effort is already becoming easier. What once felt unnatural is starting to feel normal. What once demanded constant attention is beginning to happen automatically. This is embodiment developing. Trust the process. Continue the practices. And watch as prosperity consciousness shifts from something you access to something you are. The fifth key to embodiment is natural expression of your gifts. When consciousness is fully embodied, your actions become effortless expression of who you are, rather than forced effort to get somewhere. Solomon didn't work at being wise. He naturally expressed wisdom because that's what he'd become. He didn't force himself to create wealth. Wealth flowed naturally as the expression of his consciousness. Your fully embodied prosperity will feel the same way. You won't be grinding or struggling or forcing. You'll be naturally expressing your gifts, serving through your talents, creating value through your authentic contribution, and wealth will flow as the natural result of that authentic expression. This is why finding and developing your gifts is so crucial to sustainable wealth. When you're expressing your authentic nature, providing value through your real talents, creating from your genuine passion, the work doesn't deplete you. It energizes you. The effort doesn't exhaust you. It fulfills you. The process doesn't drain you. It expresses you. And from that place of authentic expression, wealth flows naturally because you're creating real value that others genuinely appreciate and willingly pay for. You're not manipulating or pushing or convincing. You're simply being fully yourself, and that full expression is magnetic to resources, opportunities, and prosperity. What are your gifts? What comes naturally to you that others find difficult? What do you do that creates value others appreciate? What expression of yourself feels most authentic and energizing? Your embodied prosperity will flow through these channels of natural gifting. Stop trying to create wealth through means that feel forced or inauthentic. Start expressing your true gifts with full permission and confidence, and watch wealth flow as the natural consequence of authentic, valuable contribution. The sixth key to embodiment is unwavering certainty regardless of circumstances. This is perhaps the ultimate test and the ultimate achievement of embodied consciousness. Can you maintain prosperity consciousness when circumstances challenge it? Can you remain abundant when bank accounts are low? Can you stay certain when evidence doesn't support you? Can you embody wealth when external reality is screaming scarcity? Solomon could, and that's what made his consciousness unshakable. His certainty wasn't based on circumstances. It was based on his understanding of how consciousness creates reality. He knew that circumstances are temporary and consciousness is causal, so he maintained his consciousness regardless of circumstances and watched circumstances shift to match. This certainty isn't blind optimism or denial of reality. It's deep understanding that consciousness creates experience. So maintaining the consciousness you desire will inevitably create the experience that matches it. It's recognition that external reality is lag time. It takes time for new consciousness to manifest as new circumstances, but it always does eventually if you maintain the frequency consistently enough. It's trust in the process, based on understanding how manifestation actually works, rather than on visible evidence of results. You're developing this certainty now. Every time you maintain elevated consciousness despite challenging circumstances, you're building the muscle of unwavering certainty. Every time you choose abundance thinking when scarcity would be easier, you're programming unshakable faith. Every time you embody prosperity despite lack of evidence, you're becoming the consciousness that creates evidence rather than waiting for evidence to give you permission to embody the consciousness. This is mastery. This is embodiment. This is Solomon's consciousness becoming your consciousness. The seventh key to embodiment is celebration as a way of being rather than just a response to accomplishment. Embodied prosperity celebrates constantly, not because everything is perfect, but because the consciousness itself is joyful, regardless of circumstances. Solomon celebrated wisdom, beauty, creativity, love, life itself. His consciousness was fundamentally celebratory, and that frequency attracted more circumstances worthy of celebration. When celebration is your default state, the universe must provide you with an endless stream of things to celebrate, because you've established celebration as your fundamental frequency. Most people wait for accomplishment before they celebrate, for success before they feel joyful, for manifestation before they express gratitude. This is backwards. Celebration generates the frequency that attracts things worth celebrating. Joy creates circumstances that justify joy. Gratitude magnetizes experiences that warrant gratitude. When you celebrate now, regardless of current circumstances, you're embodying the consciousness that will create circumstances worthy of even greater celebration. Don't wait for wealth to feel wealthy. Feel wealthy now and watch wealth manifest. Don't wait for success to celebrate. Celebrate now and watch success appear. Practice celebration tonight as you integrate everything you've learned. Celebrate the consciousness you've built over these 10 chapters. Celebrate the limiting beliefs you've released. Celebrate the new neural pathways you've created. Celebrate the frequency shift that's already happened in your being. Celebrate the wealth that's already manifesting in ways you may not have fully recognized yet. Celebrate your commitment to transformation, your courage to change, your willingness to embody something beyond what your past programming said was possible. This celebration isn't premature. It's the frequency that will accelerate every manifestation you desire. Tonight marks a completion and a beginning. You've completed a journey through Solomon's consciousness, through the principles and practices that created his legendary wisdom and wealth. But more importantly, you're beginning your life as the embodied expression of everything you've learned. You're no longer seeking prosperity consciousness. You are prosperity consciousness. You're no longer trying to attract wealth. You are wealth expressing itself through human form. You're no longer becoming abundant. You are abundance, recognizing itself in this particular expression called your life. This isn't the end of your transformation. This is the beginning of living from transformation, of expressing through transformation, of being transformation itself. Everything you've learned becomes who you are. Every practice becomes automatic. Every principle becomes your natural way of being. You stop doing prosperity consciousness and start being prosperity consciousness. You stop practicing wealth mindset and start living as wealth itself. You stop working on embodiment and start living as the full embodiment of everything you've been cultivating. Solomon's mind wasn't different from yours in potential, only in actualization. He developed what you're developing. He embodied what you're embodying. He became what you're becoming. The difference between Solomon's legendary prosperity and your current reality is simply the consciousness you've been operating from, and that consciousness has been transforming throughout these 10 chapters. The limiting programs have been cleared. The empowering beliefs have been installed. The elevated emotions have been cultivated. The aligned actions have been practiced. The temple has been built. The circle has been curated. The legacy has been established. And now, the embodiment is complete. You are no longer who you were when you began this journey. You are no longer operating from the same consciousness, the same frequency, the same programs. You have been transformed at the deepest levels, neurologically, emotionally, energetically, consciously. The person reading these final words is already the embodied expression of prosperity consciousness, already the living demonstration of wealth principles, already the walking proof that transformation is not only possible, but inevitable when consciousness shifts completely. Sleep tonight as the fully embodied expression of prosperity. Dream as abundance itself. Wake tomorrow as wealth consciousness in human form, and live every day forward as the living demonstration that Solomon's wisdom isn't ancient history. It's eternal truth, available to everyone willing to shift their consciousness, embody new patterns, and become the prosperity they desire to experience. This is your nature. This is your truth. This is your reality now. You are the mind of Solomon. You are prosperity embodied. You are wealth made manifest. You are the living proof that consciousness creates reality, that transformation is possible, that abundance is everyone's birthright, waiting to be claimed through embodiment. Welcome home to the consciousness you were always meant to embody. Welcome to the prosperity that was always your natural state. Welcome to the wealth that was always waiting for you to recognize it, claim it, and become it. This is not the end. This is the eternal beginning of living as the embodied expression of unlimited abundance. And so it is.